ACHD has to build it, and we are incorporating. Are we sufficiently covered with indemnity, and we can do that against the state to recover all those costs? Because seems like a kind of a unique situation, very unique, where we hold the liability or the responsibility to get the project completed, but it's completely managed by the state and paid for by the state with a dedicated federal fund. But that was my main concern, is not getting into that legal one. The other on number 4 is looking at the vacation and dedication, and we'll deal with that when the hearing comes up at the end of October or middle of October, is that it just seems completely unnecessary to have the dedication. The vacation makes sense. The dedication for that extra piece of property, because it's not a cul-de-sac, it's corner. So I'll probably raise that when it comes up. I just want staff to look into that and say, do we really need that piece of property dedicated? Because the city should be managing it, not ACHD. And then the third question on the liquid asphalt, we have budgeted $3.9 million, but the proposed agreement is capped at $3.1 million. So where does the other $750,000 go? Do we reallocate it when we do our budget, or is it already dedicated? I'm looking at you, Jennifer.
Right.
So, okay, thank you. That's the main question.
Mary?
I just had a question on number 3 with the whole back and forth with Star on the PAG. Had the staff sent for or put forth a recommendation for one individual, and the city had recommended somebody else, and then everybody now is in agreement, or what exactly was the back and forth? I was thinking maybe they were a little confused with the CICAC or the city member.
Mr. President, Commissioner May, great question. The initial request or recommendation was from Star. Star misunderstood what the process was that you were very instrumental in setting up when it came down to members of our advisory boards. We explained the process to Star in detail. I'm comfortable to say that they got it. The committee then made their recommendation. We continued to do some more homework, and as you know, the staff does not have to take the committee's recommendation at that point in time. The staff then recommended Mr. Green, which is Star's recommendation after more research. They came to me with their recommendations. I agree with their recommendations based on the homework they did, and so it's now in front of you. We have conferred with the PAG chair. She fully supports the recommendation based on the additional knowledge of the specific individual and his interests versus others, and so that's where we are. We followed the process specifically, and at the end of the day, it's your determination.
Okay, and they're clear now on
yes,
how
they are very clear.
The process works. Okay,
Mr. President and Commissioner May, thank you. Yes, I sat in on or listened in on that meeting, and I was confused too, because I don't think it was conveyed to the committee, the PAG, that the request was made to the city of Star, and that Star had specifically selected somebody. So they were looking at 3 people, one of whom had written out a very detailed response and the other 2 didn't. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think from my observation of their discussion, they didn't understand that. So I think it's important, if we do have a nomination or a specific request from one of our partners, that be conveyed to our advisory committees, that they do that.
Well, Mr. President, I have some questions as well.
Yes.
So yeah, and I think I'd be concerned that process could, the confusion of the process could translate over into our other advisory committees. So is there any, because they all have the same process in terms of onboarding folks, right? So I just don't want this type of confusion to also occur at the other advisory groups. So if there is any change in the process, I just want all of them to be on the same page in terms of, because PAG wanted to do an interview process, which sounded amazing. They could actually meet the folks. I just want all of the advisory groups to be on the same page. That's
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, we share your desire.
Sweet. And then I also had a question about consent item number 2. Reading the documents that you guys provided, it wasn't, because again, it seemed like a very different situation. I did see though, it said that, maybe I misread it, but it said, would we reimburse ITD, or ITD solely would be reimbursing us for this project? They would be reimbursing us. So, and then context, like, why is ITD taking on this road, this bridge project,
Federal
instead
project.
of us?
It's just a federal project.
Oh, it's just that's why? Okay,
Right. Federal dollars.
okay.
We use federal dollars, so,
But don't,
maintenance.
Commissioners, good afternoon. So this is a special program. It is federal dollars. The Railroad Safety Program specifically, of which this project falls underneath, is managed by ITD. Typically with federal dollars, we have a lot more project management responsibilities, but with this specific program, because the ITD has a special relationship with the railroad, they actually manage the project from start to finish. And you'll see that in the agreement and with our conversations with ITD, we've been very careful. There'll be a no-go decision early on in the process, where if it looks like there's any issues, we'll pull the cord and we won't move forward with the project. ITD has never failed to complete one of these projects once the decisions have been made. So ultimately, we believe it's a good opportunity for the district to have this improvement and take advantage of this program. We have done these in the past. This is not the first one we've done. And so we believe that the staff recommendation stands that we should move forward.
and how did this funding like come to be?
So, we've had to learn how to become experts on railroad law. And under Idaho law, ITD really administers and regulates the railroads within the state. And so this is an odd situation, but it's because they have that pivotal role under law over railroad crossings. So that's
So
how
did the funding come from, like, did the ITD pursue this funding, or they just received this funding from the, like, that's where I'm,
that's an allotment that they get.
oh, okay, got it, thank you,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Thank you.
But they administer they're the conduit that we have to work with. We would never be able to get any federal money absent that.
And there's, I mean, I obviously don't have all of our, like, a map of all of our railroad adjacent or impacted, bridges and roadways, but is there like a strategy behind what they're fixing in terms of this is a project that was high on our list or their list? What's kind of the strategy going into this particular project versus maybe other projects that could have been funded?
So yes, there is a strategy. We coordinate with ITD and the railroad. It's a discussion between all the parties, and the projects that get selected are those that have the most need. And if you go this specific crossing, I don't know if you've ever driven over it, it's a mess. And so it's kind of the highest need. The crossings that need the most help rise to the top through the ITD process. And there's also what fits in the money slot from a cost perspective.
And is it by like, the actual conditions, or does population have a role to play in the prioritization of those projects? Because
It's condition and location,
Okay.
Commissioner, yeah.
thank you.
So, Mr. President, and Justin, I'm gonna raise this when we have our discussion on the 5-year plan, because to my view, the crossing at Malad is a higher priority, and especially since there's gonna be a whole new development coming up. And also crossings at Victory and at Peasley. So when we say it's priority, it's ITD priority, but from our own priority, I think it's important for us to sort of engage in that process so that we can say, this area is highly commercial, but here's a residential area where kids are crossing. The only school is on the other side of the railroad tracks. And this has been a concern for those neighborhoods. So let's get into that discussion on the 5-year plan so that we understand we don't want ITD setting our priorities, since we're the ones who basically are gonna be taking responsibility for this railroad crossing. Because I think there are several other railroad crossings, in my view, are a higher priority than this one.
And we're glad to take that input.
That's a completely separate application process, isn't it, for these individual projects?
Yes, Commission President, if we're adding like pedestrian facilities or expanding a crossing, it's a very different project than what is being described here on Benjamin.
Gotcha.
Okay.
And we have lots of crossing projects that don't involve the federal funds where we just do them ourselves, in coordination with the railroads, and that's a lot of fun, but, yeah, so this is really just for those that are eligible, working with ITD and the railroads and that may be a separate priority than what we have. We do a lot of railroad crossings,
Right.
With our own funds.
And just so the rest of the commission knows, I see Tom Furch taking notes, copious notes, and he will be, I'm sure, waving his magic wand when it comes time to fund a lot of these other projects.
Mr. President, thank you. I was going to remind the commission that we have a tremendous secret weapon.
Yes,
And
we
that's
do.
Tom Furch, who finds all these federal programs and federal dollars for us, without whom we would not be able to do a lot of these different projects or tee up with ITD on specific areas of your concerns going forward. So Tom deserves a lot of credit for the extra federal dollars that we're able to bring into the district at a low cost to the district, but a great benefit to all of the citizens going across. And Mr. President, if I could have just one more second, please,
Okay.
because I know we're behind time, but, and we'll talk about this later, but commissioners, tomorrow is a very important day.
That's right.
Tomorrow, a certain member of the commission celebrates an anniversary, his 21st birthday. And
The
so-
49th anniversary.
I wasn't going to go there. So Commissioner Goldthorpe, on behalf of the entire team, happy birthday. We do have some celebration items over here for you, and we did get a big enough cake so you can take some home as you asked. So with that,
Okay, then we will go ahead and begin our regular commission meeting as we normally do with the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would join us. I pledge allegiance to the
and to the republic, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for
For those of you just joining us who are really seriously disappointed that we didn't have the rest of the director's report already, we'll be having that immediately after the regular agenda items. But welcome. I would be happy to begin the meeting with a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. We'll go ahead to the consent agenda now, which we've had some discussion on. Items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a commissioner or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. And all consent agenda items are commission action items unless otherwise noted. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. And we'll get to our, that was a long consent agenda, by the way, and a lot was accomplished there. We'll go to our regular agenda items, which are also action items. Item number 1 is resolution number 2363, the proposed vacation exchange of public right-of-way at Brody Square Subdivision, West Daphne Street, with Pinnacle Land Development LLC being the applicant. And Diane will give the presentation on this.
Surprise.
Well, you know, I already know where Dave is.
Yes. President Goldthorpe, Commissioners, good afternoon. I'm Diane Bevins, the Manager of Capital Projects. And we're here today for a decision briefing on a vacation exchange on Daphne Street for the Brody Square subdivision. ACHD received an application from Pinnacle Land Development LLC. The vacation area is 0.31 acres and the dedication area is 2.35 acres. You won't see any discussion about value of the property because the dedication area is so much larger than the area that we're vacating. This is part of a development application and the applicant has paid the application fee. This is a zoomed out area vicinity map. On the west side is Black Cat, and on the south side is McMillan. This is a close-up view where the red is the vacation area and the green is the dedication. Staff recommendation is to adopt and sign resolution number 2363, authorizing the proposed vacation dedication as the applicant has met all the requirements. And I will stand for any questions.
I have none. Does anyone have any?
I do, Mr. President.
Yes.
I have some.
Diane, so with this type of request, could you go back? Thank you. So that, I'm assuming the applicant, purchased all of that property, right? And they're gonna be building a subdivision, right? So is there any plan, are they gonna be blocking Daphne Street? Like, I'm just worried that in case somebody might be driving through, right? What happens in terms of once we approve, if we approve this, what happens to the actual street for all of the other neighbors, if there are any, that would anybody be impacted by that until that subdivision is actually developed?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Pickering, I would look to DTS to help me answer this question since it's part of an active development application. But the green is what the new roads will be.
Right.
So it would be taking a left or right and coming back, to go east on Daphne.
So I guess my more succinct question is, are people going to be traveling on Daphne? And at one point, would they not be, and would there be applicable signage at some point, because we're gonna be vacating that?
Okay. So it looks like there's another connection to Daphne and that has been all worked out through the development process.
Okay, perfect.
Mr. President? Oh, go ahead.
Well, is there a timing requirement? Do the other streets have to be in place before that vacated part of Daphne Street is taken out?
And President Goldthorpe, Commissioner McKinney, I'll again have to defer to Steve.
Sure.
It's very typical that we condition the vacation until the improvements of the development have been made, so Daphne would continue. We probably wouldn't record the order of the vacation until those improvements have been made.
Okay.
Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So presumably this was subject of negotiations with the City of Meridian and the developer and ACHD on replacing this Daphne Street with another network of streets that's more conducive to the development. So in those negotiations, was there any discussion about temporary access for this neighborhood to the school? Because we have recently received, it's come to my attention, issues of, what is it called, Pleasant Valley Elementary School up on Gondola. So Gondola's the mid-mile collector, just north of there. So it's all the homes in this area are going to be, the children are going to be going up to that school. But there is a piece of property in between, and it doesn't appear to have any connectivity. So in the meantime, those families, until it happens, until there's some connectivity within that subdivision, the kids will have to walk out to Black Cat and up and around, or more likely their parents, not feeling it safe, will drive them. So in the negotiations, was there an understanding that, we need to have a network of pathways at least until this whole area gets built out, so kids can walk and bike to the elementary school that's right there? Is that part of these negotiations? And because it's not anywhere in this.
No.
And so we're in a powerful position, as is the City of Meridian, because the developer wants an approval, and we can ask, we'd like to see this happen. Can you negotiate with these property owners for temporary access or whatever, so that as the neighborhood gets built out, there are safe routes to school?
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, fair question. We don't have anybody here today that can give you any of the details on the negotiations with the developer or the city on this. You can defer that if you would like, so we can have the appropriate people here to provide some insight on that. But today, we're unprepared to discuss it. But this application is really just the vacation on its merits in accordance with the statute. So any of those discussions, you can hold off on this application until that occurs.
Well, I'd really like that, because I think it's really important that we already know where the school site is. We already have information from the neighbors, very concerned about the lack of safe crossings to that school site on Gondola and Blackhead. So it seems to me we're getting the cart before the horse if we're saying, well, our leverage is gone because this is obviously one of the most, we care about how people drive, walk, and bike when this is all built out.
Jim, I don't know if you refer to this as the cart or the horse, but we have the cart or the horse standing here
Oh, good.
ready
Have
to
the
talk to
applicant
us.
Oh,
can
good.
provide
Maybe you can
insight.
enlighten me on whether those discussions can happen as part of this.
President Goldthorpe, Jeff Bauer with Gibbons Pursley, 601 West Bannock. Commissioner Hanson, this map's perfect visualization here. Our whole development is these 3 parcels that you can see on the screen. So the 1 parcel south of Daphne and the 2 north, that's the entirety of our project. So we don't actually have connectivity to the north at this point. And so what you're seeing with the Green Street network is the entirety of this project. And we're building all required sidewalks per your standards.
Yeah. So, Mr. President, and I didn't catch your name.
Jeff Bauer.
Mr. Bauer, thank you. And I've seen in many other cases where a developer of a, as it were, isolated parcel understands that it's ultimately going to be connected to others, and is in a position to negotiate, can we have a pathway across your property, a temporary easement, or whatever it is, because that's the direction the flow of people will eventually take place. It doesn't necessarily lock it in. We've seen that where we've had a route for cars and pedestrians and it's moved, but at least in the interim, there's that safe network. We don't know how long it will take for those connections to take place, but I know, your client wants to build those houses, and those houses will probably have kids in them. And so since we know that's the direction, and we will be responsible, ACHD will be, to make sure there are safe routes within that development. At this point, it would be a good time to negotiate and just say, hey, approach those property owners and say, can we have a path across your property? Because this is where the kids are going to go to school. It's not very far away. It looks like it's about a quarter mile or less.
Jim, I would also suggest that, there's going to be some development here, but there would of necessity, or could be of necessity, some connectivity to the sidewalk that's obviously on the west side of the street, and need crossing, either signalized or a hawk signal or something crossing there. And I am sure that our staff is, in the negotiation process and the approval process, cognizant of this and will address that going forward.
Mr. President, I have a follow-up question.
Yes.
Can you kind of describe the vision for this project? Because I see that there's a couple little spurs, and they don't look like they're gonna be, cul-de-sacs. So are they gonna be cul-de-sacs, or are they gonna connect to a different sequence of projects?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Pickering, at this time, again, this is a preliminary plat that was approved back in 2020, and this vacation is a condition of approval from the City of Meridian. We're getting to the point at this time where we're ready to go and final plat this project.
Uh-huh.
And so this vacation is a condition of recording our final plat. We did work, I believe Austin Miller was staff person on this project at the time that we worked with on the layout of the streets. These connections are in places that it was determined at the time would help to build out your planned network in this corridor. They are anticipated to be future connections.
So my guess is that because there's been a preliminary plat approved already, that perhaps in order to avoid sidewalk gaps and things like that, maybe we could take a look at that preliminary plat once again, not to do any conditioning or anything else, but just to see where we as a commission might exert our influence to make sure those things don't happen on our watch. That sound okay, Jim?
Well, I think, as Mr. Price said, we could defer this and see if there could be some movement, because we cannot make another property owner give you an easement, but we can at least create an expectation that there be negotiations and discussions, because that ultimate property owner, because these roads are stubbing out against their property, may well be, benefiting from a development that will connect them ultimately. But in the meantime, the people living in this neighborhood won't have a safe route to school.
Mr. President, Commissioners, the land application, the preliminary plat, the City of Meridian approved it without conditions. The opportunity for us to exact any kind of improvements is gone.
Yep.
And simply before you is a vacation application. I didn't know that, Commissioner Hanson, until I just found out that this City of Meridian didn't require any conditions. It should have been done at that time. Today, Mr. Bauer's correct. He's got 3 parcels. He has a very simple application before the district. It was a condition of the development. He's trying to meet that condition, and he's dedicating a lot more right-of-way in exchange for the vacation of a little bit of right-of-way. We staff can, Commissioner Hanson, we can look at that and see what can be done in terms of some temporary facilities to the school, but I don't think we can require this applicant to do that.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions for Diane? Then, okay, since we've heard from both sides and this is a public hearing, is there anyone else in the audience or on Zoom who would like to address this particular item? Then we'll close the public hearing. and
Mr.
the
President,
map-
excuse me, it looks like somebody has their hand raised on Zoom, but they don't have a name associated with.
Stacy, you see anybody? Okay,
I think, Commissioner Goldthorpe, this is Christy Little.
Oh, it's Christy Little.
oh, Christy, hi.
Hi. Sorry, I am at my desk in my office up at Orchard. So I just wanted the commission to be aware, that we did just last week receive a preliminary plat application from the City of Meridian for the rectangular parcel directly north of this plat. And that does show us, that completes the local street connection between Gondola and this site that we're looking at on the map today.
So we can interact with the City of Meridian to make sure that a free pass for connectivity doesn't happen again?
No, what I'm saying is this is what we received, what our staff is working on right now. Is
Right.
a small plat that connects the north to the south
Okay,
from a public street standpoint.
Mr.
So there will be
President,
vehicular.
Christie, I have a
Okay.
question. It looks like the design of this does not stub to the north, it stubs to the east. And not to that property you're describing, because we can see the property line is not far away. So how will it connect?
Hold on just a second. Let's pull that up.
I'm just looking at Google Maps, that development to the north, has a little stub street called Cepino Avenue, and it comes down, but it looks like its direction is too far to the east from this, property before us, so I just wondered how it will connect without yet another property owner agreeing.
Yeah, I guess Commissioners, the east-west substreet, Commissioner Hanson, that connects into this new preliminary plat application that we have. And then the north-south connection is made through this current application that we have, that we're working on. So this site plan and this already approved plat includes a substreet. Now we have a new plat that will extend that substreet up to Gondola.
So Christie, if I might, being is that we have these questions and your department is analyzing a new application, before all the things get signed off, would it be possible for the commission to look that over? Perhaps
Yes, that would be helpful.
that it be the regular agenda item?
Okay.
Mr. President, Commissioners, we can't really do that until we've had a public notice and the application.
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
sure,
But once
okay.
that, you'll absolutely, most certainly anticipate that application coming before the commission and you acting on it.
Yeah, it was only a curious question.
Yes. You know how sensitive I am about that.
Yes, I do. And thank you for being that way. Okay,
So, Mr. President, I, if we could defer this a week, that would be helpful, to have some of these questions clarified. I'd also like us to have the opportunity, when we discuss these, to see how, our adopted, performance measures, might, fit into this. And frankly, it would not have come to my attention if we hadn't had this flurry of requests from the neighborhood to the north about access to this new school, this little elementary school. So we have other issues up there about once they cross, and even if we make or encourage the connection between this and other developments. It's just that, I guess the analysis of these needs to be more than just how will a car drive through this neighborhood, but how will this neighborhood fit into all the other neighborhoods and the places people will want to go and will go, especially
well, Jim, if you
children.
would like that deferral to be made, you can make it as a motion.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure, I heard that Steve indicated that it wouldn't be,
Procedurally, this applicant, I don't know how we can require him to be part of that discussion. His development's already been approved. There's a condition. We can't condition anything or use anything that's off-site to influence the decision as to whether to vacate it. Most certainly, I think the discussion is warranted with the preliminary plat that's coming. And anticipate you having that at some time in the near future. So we're really not discussing a development application, we're discussing a vacation application, and we really need to keep it on that basis.
Yes, and Jim, I believe I asked the director to mention the telesis that we've received about the crossings to the north and that sort of thing. So you'll be hearing about that in a few moments.
If I could, President, just one more
Yes.
thing. As I mentioned, this preliminary plat was approved almost a year ago, so we're at the point of final plat. So we've made a lot of the improvements, utilities, grading, things like that, to put this road in this location, Commissioner Hanson. And as your legal counsel mentioned, all we're here to talk about today is vacating that red section, which will not affect the connectivity either, as it stands today or tomorrow. And so we're happy to cooperate in the future. If we end up getting additional land in this area and developing it, we want to be part of that street network. But again, we're just here on the vacation today, and we're not in a position to change the location of those streets at this time.
Thank you very much. Okay, Now, the matter is properly before us as the hearing has been closed for a discussion and a motion.
I move to approve resolution number 2363, proposed vacation exchange of public right-of-way at Brody Square Subdivision, West Daphne Street, Pinnacle Land Development LLC.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Okay, the motion carries. We will go to item number 2, which is the first addendum to the cooperative governmental agreement between Valley Regional Transit and Ada County Highway District for Transit Structures, and this will be a request for approval.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is in response to some prior discussions between the commission about the willingness to contribute funding to Valley Regional Transit. Under Idaho law, ACHD has the authority to contribute funding to our public transportation partner. And at your direction, I have prepared an addendum to a transit structures agreement that we've had ongoing for a number of years. I think we're halfway through that agreement. What the agreement simply does is that it allows VRT to come to the commission and apply for matching funds in order to leverage against federal transit dollars. The commission at that time can vote yea or nay on whether to do that and apply. You can also say no at that time. This simply puts into an agreement that what your wishes, that I would receive direction, is to provide the process and the opportunity. They don't come to staff and ask for the funding, they come to the commission and the commission has to approve it or deny it. At that time, any of those requests, you can consider the leverage against the federal dollars, what the type of project it is. All of those details can be met at that time. So it's really just contractually a way for VRT to approach the commission to seek funding. And with that, I'll stand it for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Steve? All right.
Thank you for your work on this.
Yeah, thank you very much. This definitely did come by commission direction. So we have before us a request for approval of this first addendum. And it is properly before the commission for a discussion and a motion.
Mr. President,
Yes, Dave?
I know there's a lot of interest on the part of VRT for additional funding and so on. I have to admit that I'm, given our own budget constraints, on the one hand, we do cooperate with VRT and should cooperate with VRT. On the other hand, the challenge I see is that to a very large extent, not 100%, but to a very large extent, this valley, the population density is such that transit is a net cost, a significant cost, and most of the buses drive around empty most of the day. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't worthwhile routes and worthwhile services that are being provided. That's the kind of thing, you know, that's debatable. You know, reasonable people can have different opinions on that, but my only concern with this agreement is that when it is in place and then an application is made by a VRT, we as a commission, there's a very high likelihood that I think we're going to be really feeling obligated to say yes to whatever comes along. And even though transit in general is good and transit in concept is good, to a large extent it doesn't work very well in this valley. And of course, again, it all comes down to our limited funds. We have, you know, budget challenges that we deal with every year, and we've just been through that process. So I'm only concerned that this agreement, as good as it is, I think we're likely to be under a lot of pressure to always say yes to every request that comes along. And that's my only concern about this.
Well, I can tell you for myself personally, I felt compelled to at least have this particular addendum in place, but I feel absolutely no compulsion to approve any funds whatsoever until we've had a chance to see them, see a request, discuss it thoroughly, make sure that it's on some of the most successful and important routes that VRT has. In particular, in my opinion, is, you know, State Street is far and away the most important corridor that we're dealing with. And so anyway, I'm curious and kind of eager to see what comes of this and exactly whether or not it will be to mutual advantage to enter into actually any match funding with VRT, but certainly under no obligation. Any other comments?
Mr. President, I think, thank you, Steve, for putting this together. This just lays out the protocol for them to come to us and in the hopes that we will provide a match to a grant that they receive. So it doesn't lock us in that anytime they come to us, we have to award those funds to them. So it'll have to be by a majority vote of the commission. But I'm glad we have this procedure in place that allows them to have that opportunity to come to us. So.
Yeah, and one last comment from me. I mean, I've been on VRT's board, and one of us is right now. I can't remember. Who is it?
It's me.
Thank you.
I'm the alternate.
Yes. And one of the things you learn being on a board is exactly whether or not that board is exactly whether or not the buses are empty, what the motives behind requests are, all kinds of different things. And that was very enjoyable for me when I was on their board. And I do look forward to seeing what comes of this. We have, as past commissions, and I think I've mentioned this more than once before, we have always indicated a very strong interest and desire to do whatever we can to ensure that our partners are successful. And VRT is a partner, and we've discussed in those terms the State Street corridor many times about trying to make sure that can become successful. And we've had positive and negative conversations about it over the years, and I'm sure that'll continue. And as Commissioner May just discussed or described, this is only a framework for possibly providing some support, more support to that end. Mm-hmm. Anybody else have something to say, or did we cover it okay, Jim?
Commissioner Pickering wanted to say something.
Oh, I just want to say thank you all for the discussion and thank you, Mr. Price, for putting this together. Very excited about it.
I just echo that. I agree.
Then it would be appropriate to have a motion.
Mr. President, I move to approve the first addendum to cooperative governmental agreement between Valley Regional Transit and Ada County Highway District for transit structures.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then the motion carries. Is now time on our agenda for public communications. Stacy, has anybody asked to speak to us? Is there anyone here in the audience that would like to speak to us? Yes. Gee, I didn't recognize you behind that. Who's that masked man, you know? And otherwise, I would ask for you to come up while we were addressing your successful motion.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Commission. Stephen Hunt, Development Director at Valley Regional Transit, and just wanted to thank you for the work that went into the previous motion and action, and look forward to continuing to work with you all. But that was all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hope I didn't disappoint you for not being able to talk earlier.
Not at all. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen.
I've known Steve since he was real small, so I think I can kid him. All right, then we are adjourned. We will go into, we'll take a 10-minute pause, then we'll go back into work sessions, but first we'll have the director's report before those work sessions start.
Do you want to do a director's report now, or?
Pardon?
You want to do the director's report up here or down there?
Well, I think we can do the director's report up here.
they were enjoying some
Okay, it
wonderful
sounds
cake.
like we're live. We'll turn some time over to the director for his director's report.
Okay, Mr. President, Commissioners, thank you. And such a couple things I'd like to share with you. First off, in front of you, you have a packet, which is our, I believe, our final draft review of our ADA transition plan review that we've been working on now for some time. Earlier today, one of our team members said, "This is great, this journey's about over." My thought is, no, this journey never ends, and such. We will continue to focus on these things. We wanted to share the insights with you, and quite frankly, they're very good. And you'll notice it's attorney-client on those, so you have paper copies when you're done. I would ask that you do return them back to the general counsel as you work through those. But the bottom line is that we, I believe, and Steve, please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we were one of the first government organizations in Idaho to go down this path. And I believe we're the first in the country. I believe we're one of the first organizations to continue to update our ADA transition plan because, as I said, it's a never-ending journey as we work through this and such. For Commissioners McKinney and Pickering, we did a lot of this internally, but we did contract out with the Gold Star gold level rating group, MIG, from California. They are nationally known for their efforts in ADA operations. So we listen very closely to what they have to say when it comes down to reviews. So we're in the final process. This is another draft. If you would, I know we've already given you a lot of homework, and I'm giving you more homework, but if you could take the time to take a look at it, and please share your comments with us, and because we'll be coming back to you in the not too distant future with a final on our ACHD's or MIG's assessment of ADA's transition plan going forward.
Mr. President, Director, what do you mean by a final? Because this is a report, so you're saying you're going to come with a proposed set of like recommendations, or what did you mean by that?
There is the MIG group assesses everything that we do when it comes to ADA. This is their second draft of their assessment for us. We are now reviewing it as a staff to see if there's something there that we missed. They could maybe focus on a little differently, anywhere from our commuter ride stops to winter operations to sidewalk operations across the board. And when we give back our final feedback and of yours, they'll make it into the final report on how we're doing and where we can maybe better focus on, and maybe where we can maybe partner with other agencies going forward. So it is a big deal on this, and so it's been a year effort right now, if I'm not mistaken. About that, Steve, I'm sorry.
More than a year.
Yeah, if some of the commissioners recall, a year ago, we were directed to have an audit of all of our operations, not just our roadways, but all the facilities. And so MIG came in. We had used them as part of our transition plan that was adopted a little over a year ago. They came in and looked at our previous transition plan. They made a bunch of suggestions. The commission adopted that, that includes the inventorying of all of our facilities. They came in and did sampling and tests as part of, that was the transition, and the commission at the time was concerned, wanting to make sure that we look comprehensively. There's a big debate in the world of ADA, and that is what the federal law absolutely requires and what the guidelines require. And the commission at the time required us to do an assessment with a cost-benefit analysis, Commissioner McKinney, which I'm sure you love, to look at what I only bring that up because you always talk about cost-benefit, but to look at what the cost would be. One is of course we have to follow the federal law, and in that includes staffing, resources, inspection, training, all of that. And this report addresses all of those issues. It also looks at the other component, and that would be the cost benefit to go from beyond the federal requirement. Now, I will tell you that many of the guidelines, they're either being absorbed gradually or through the MUTCD. And then all of a sudden, what happens if you don't do it? Then in a few years, when the PROWAG is what they call it, if those guidelines are accepted, then all of a sudden we have deficient facilities. And so, but the commission at the time directed they wanted that cost benefit analysis that's in the audit report. I believe it's thorough. It's a good report. Staff has been working with them. They've come out, inspected all of our facilities, and noted where we have issues. You'll see that. Areas that we can improve, and also specific recommendations. So we want you to be part of that. Again, staff is, and really the director who pushes us. ADA is a very important issue to us. It's a huge responsibility. We have a huge network to make sure we're compliant with. And this is really the kind of the final piece in the last couple of years towards that goal.
Mr. Price, so when are we gonna get the final draft, and what's gonna be different from this draft to that final draft?
Any comments that our staff provide the consultant, or any comments you provide, they will go in and the consultant will consider those. And then once they've made any changes or suggestions, then that would be the final draft. So this is really a comment period.
So are we just commenting on, like, what exactly are we commenting on? Just like yay, nay, or extra things for consideration?
Did we miss anything?
Okay.
Are we not looking, you know, are there questions that you have on particular areas where you don't feel like you fully understand it? Things like that.
That's really helpful, because I was worried that we would be saying, like, endorsing something when it's supposed to be an
You're not
audit.
endorsing,
Thank you.
you're only commenting on it.
Thank
and
you.
If you say you don't like it, but I don't like this, make it better. We'll strive to make it better. But at the end of the day, the consultant is really making an audit of what's going on, and we want to make sure that the audit is thorough.
Right.
And provide you the information, all of the information that you want to see in going forward with our ADA plan.
Thank you. I'm really excited to read it, and I am glad to hear that hopefully will not be providing any bias for this auditor. So thank you, that's great.
You don't, when it's attorney-client, you don't get that chance yet. When we take that label off, then you get to approve it.
Mr. President?
Yes.
A couple of questions. One is, of course, none of us have the level of expertise or experience on ADA issues that our advisory committee does. Are they allowed to see this? I mean, they're meeting this week or next week, and we rely on them for input back to us to help us inform us, listening in on their discussion. So how do we do that? Do we then issue a draft that's public and then have them comment on it?
Well, once we get through this initial review, and we remove the label, then we'll be reviewing that with our different committees, advisory committees, and they can provide comment to the commission.
And then we can change it and adopt it.
We can have further analysis done. We can.
Well, it makes sense that we do that, because that's why we have them.
You're a couple of steps ahead of.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
but there'll be that. Trust me, have full expectation that we're going to be able to have public comment as well as our advisory comments on this.
Good. Well, and that was why I was surprised Rachel wasn't here to make the presentation, or aid, because that's one of the.
This is a legal project.
Oh, okay, but one of the requirements the commission wanted was somebody to manage the whole ADA compliance effort and work closely with the community in integrating ADA accessibility issues. And that's why we created that position,
Well,
4
we
years
went
ago
early on
or
it.
so. And yeah, so that's real important.
Yeah.
One more thing, and that is, one of the best presentations, there were two really good presentations at the Commercial Developers Advisory Committee, and Christy Inselman and Christy Little, the two Christys did a great job. Christy Little spoke about an aspect which was the challenge of inspections. That she really was challenging them, the developers in this is a challenge, because our relationship is with the contractor, not the developer. And I think the developers said, you know, can we do something so we know about that? Because they hire the contractors, but we're the ones that have the relationship with them legally to comply. And, you know, we're the ones who send the inspectors out and go after them and go after them and go after them. And the developer may not know that one of their contractors, you know, until it's too late. So they know, and I don't know if that's part of this, is the communication system with, when there is non-compliance, and we have to send our inspectors out, and we have to obviously incur some public cost in doing that.
Well, this report doesn't get into that detail. It talks about your processes and procedures. And once this report has been approved by the commission and we receive direction, then we will go and change our policies and procedures to implement many of the recommendations, including something along those lines.
Yeah, I thought that was an excellent recommendation. I like,
This
if we
is a
can
bigger
move on
picture.
that in the interim, that would be great.
Yeah, this is just a bigger picture of, yeah, you got the right people, you got the right processes, or you don't. You could do these things better. And then when we get that, then we can get into the details of how the organization needs to improve.
So when we adopt the final, or accept the final report, I guess you accept the
You
report.
accept it, but it doesn't
It'll-
stop
it-
you from,
It'll indicate where the hot spots are in our own policy that we would need to adjust. In other words, it would highlight that, and they would have to then,
they would make
Forced to come back.
recommendations at that point, but it would highlight areas of concern.
okay.
And
thanks.
we can ask them at a subsequent call to help with the development of those policies, but no, it won't get into that level of detail. It's a bigger picture of the whole program itself.
Thanks.
Yes.
Can I ask a very technical legal question here? Given that the document is labeled as privileged attorney work product, when we're done reviewing it and giving comments, do we need to actually hand these back to you?
Yes.
Okay.
And just so you all know, when I first went over our, the position.
You
that
want to
we
waive
cr-
the privilege.
Yeah, we went over the position that we created for an ADA coordinator. My only and first comment or question was, will they be able to find the offenders? The director said yes, but he would have to approve the level of fines, which means that I would never get that job because the fines would be pretty high.
You just keep trying to find the right job.
Pardon?
You just keep trying to find the right job. Flagger wasn't gonna work. Issuing fines isn't gonna work. Guess we're stuck with Ken.
Here's some more.
Commissioners, I'm going to file a complaint right now. Commissioner Hanson continues to review my notes before I even get to them and jumps the ball. We've already had follow-on discussions based on the very good commercial developers session here in the staff. And what I've asked our team to do, and I believe this will be accomplished next week, if I'm not mistaken, was to bring together here the leadership from the engineering teams and our teams to sit down and talk about how we can, as an organization and a collaborative group, solve some of the issues that the commercial developers did raise. Commissioner Hanson is right. When that session did start, I did caution the commercial developers, as I think Commissioner Hanson will remember that. The idea of the issues of having a backlog of approvals was a two-way street. You were complimented very nicely on the initiatives that you've approved on bringing people into this building. They thought that was just an absolutely great idea. But at the other side, I made sure they understood that they have a responsibility and that their engineers, we don't do their homework. We don't correct their homework. That's not what the staff is here for. And it had become apparent that there are several engineering firms that would do the absolute minimum, not abide by the requirements that our staff has put out, hand it into us and say, okay, make this work, while at the same time being paid from the contractors for work that our staff was doing. So what I've asked our team to do, as I said earlier, is to bring the groups together and let's see how we can solve this. There's got to be some things at the district here that we can streamline internally, I think. We were going to have a very candid discussion with those engineering teams, let them know where we're seeing shortfalls. I have told our engineering team, Development Technical Services, that my intention is to share that information with the commercial developers per their request, to say, here are the firms that we're having problems with, you're having problems with. And we'll go from there, see if we can make this work. Again, I think there's room on both sides of the equation to better the process, make it quicker across the board, because as one developer, I spoke to him just yesterday, stated that you know, a week or two delay costs about $50,000 and such. And as one of the developers stated in that meeting, that they have zero bench stock right now when it comes down to homes going up, because of the line up that they have to have here to get our approval moving forward. So I truly believe that there is room for improvement on all sides. I'm going to be very interested. I'm not going to attend this session next week and such. I think it's important for the staffs to sit down and work through this. But I'm confident that we will be able to come forward and say we have some ideas to include with the right engineering firms. I know Dale's probably dying back there right now, to outsource certain things at a certain cost that may, again, expedite across the board. But what we don't want to do is outsource those types of processes to engineering firms that we're having problems with, because they'll just make it worse. So more to come on that. And such, as I said, I've asked this meeting to be held next week, and I'll, if we're done before the Wednesday session, great, I'll have an update. If not, I'll share whatever we know after that.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I had spoken with Commissioner Goldthorpe. I had called into the Developers Council. I didn't Zoom, I was on my cell phone. And I thought it was a really good meeting, a lot of give and take. And I was really interested and impressed with Christy Little's conversation about the steps they're taking, what they're seeing, et cetera. So I thought that was really enlightening, and I think it would be a good idea maybe for her to share that with the rest of the commission. But I thought it really gave a good perspective and kind of lets us know just where we are, what we're dealing with. Like you say, it's on both sides. And but anyway, I would like to have Christy come and share that with the commission if she has time.
Mr. President, Commissioner May, absolutely, and I will let you know that I've asked our teams to have those two presentations shared with all of our advisory members. They're on the agenda, both the PHE, the Bicycle Advisory Committee, and the ADA going forward, and that's going to make for a little lengthier meeting, but I think it's very important that our advisory team members hear what the commercial developers heard, and so both Christine on the budget and Chrissy Inselman on the issues of integrated, all those great things. They'll be there on that.
Right. And I really appreciated the give and take with the developers, their perspective and their offers to help and be a partner in the whole process. So it was a good meeting all the way around. Christy Inselman, Christine, everybody. So.
And they did a very good, like I said, they're very supportive.
I would agree. I think that'd be great. Christy did, both Christies, but Christy did a great, Priscilla did a great presentation. I was so surprised when she said, you know, we're talking about, there are between 50 and 75% of the submittals have mistakes or omissions. And we're talking about something that's pretty serious. And I think it's important that we get in and understand and have that discussion with Christy, because we're going to be expected later on to deal with policies. It's not just between staff and developers, it's also with us, so we have that discussion. So I look forward to a discussion. There's one other discussion that happened towards the end, and actually Ben Zamzo brought up, and would love to have a discussion tied in with the City of Boise. They're doing a complete overhaul in their zoning reform, and I think will have a direct impact on all kinds of things that we're working on. So I would love to have a work session or with Boise or with Boise staff or perhaps some of the people on this rezone committee. With the commission, if not, then maybe just a couple of us commissioners meet with them and say, because the landscape is changing, and it's probably going to change significantly with their emphasis more on mixed uses than on single uses. Thank you. That's it. Might as well hit the highlights from that meeting.
The commissioners, as you know, yesterday, Steve Price and I were at Meridian City Hall. I sent you the note last night. The mayor and city council were very gracious in supporting the request that you made to defer the Ustick yard to a date certain, 8 March. I truly believe that we will get to a mutually agreed upon solution on that. We will keep you posted on any type of staff interaction as we move forward on that. Now, that being said, at the end of the sessions, the Meridian City Council dedicated properties to ACHD. I wanted to remind you that that was part of the 18 August agenda meeting that you all took in approving a cooperative development between Brighton, the City of Meridian, and ACHD regarding Lake Hazel and developing that park area out there. That was for right-of-way and such going forward. So they were very right on the spot as soon as you'd approved the cooperative development agreement that was on their agenda to start their first steps in their part of the agreement and such. And I know that Brighton was very appreciative when it was all said and done. Your golf tournament, charity golf tournament, is going to be a huge success and such. I think Stacy's going to need a week's vacation after this is all said and done. But everything is on track. It's this Saturday at Spurwing. If you would like to help or volunteer any time, please let us know, and we'll make sure that you are put to great work. But I will remind you that Senator Winder is going to be reading the proclamation of the ACHD's 50th anniversary. At that, we have Mark Johnson from Channel 7 coming out to do auction off, I think, 11 golfers.
Terrible golfer.
It doesn't matter.
Well, it's so competitive that nobody wants to be around a terrible competitive golfer. But thank you, though.
But if you are able to come out and help out, I know it'd be greatly appreciated for a couple minutes, whatever your time can. But for right now, we may break records. We may break the 200,000 ceiling that we have. And of course, the charity this year is the Wycomico Warriors, and I'm sure they'll be very, very happy with that. And then, let's see, well, I think that's really about, final, as I shared with you last night, engineering is looking at potential intersections to do that massive immediate cross that we do at Lincoln and University, both in Boise and in Meridian. We have a little bit ways to go because the engineers have got to do all the mathematics and all that good stuff first, but hope to bring that to you shortly as a recommendation, and then we'll talk to the cities if they're interested in us developing that any further. So with that, that's my director's report for all of you. I'll stand for any questions you might have.
Nope, we're
Director,
good.
oh, sorry. Director, is there any other new updates on the flashing yellow saga at all in terms of fixing what's wrong?
Not that I'm aware of, no. The only update I had was the photo I shared with you this morning about the one that got hit and still worked.
That was an ugly mast arm.
But I will check.
Thank you.
Okay, then we're through with the director's report. We're ready to go into our first work session, which is to hear from Matt Edmond, CCDC, an update on the proposed State Street Urban Renewal Plan. Hi, Matt.
Hello, President, Commission. Thanks for having me today. Matt Edmond, Director of Parking and Mobility with Capital City Development Corporation. Here to talk to you about the State Street Urban Renewal Plan. And this is a follow-up to my presentation to you back in March. So the CCDC board.
This isn't on the Zoom, by the way. There it is.
Righty, so the CCDC board did approve the plan back in August and transmitted it to the city, and the city is in turn transmitting that out to the taxing districts, including the highway district, this week. Should have it no later than Friday. How do I?
You need something.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
A little bit of background. So this slide may look familiar. State Street's the only major corridor north of the Boise River that connects downtown Boise with parts west. And as such, transportation land use agencies have been working to encourage transit and alternative transportation along the corridor since the early 2000s. You can see with the first document, the State Street corridor study back in 2004. Urban renewal and tax increments been acknowledged as one potential implementation tool for developing it as a transit corridor, both in the State Street corridor study and the TTOP. And so this urban renewal district really seeks to build on these efforts by facilitating the kind of compact, mixed use, mixed income development that is supportive of and supported by transit along the corridor. So this was the study area back in March. Now it is we're referring to it as the district. It spans from Horseshoe Bend in the west to 27th Street in the east. It is on both sides of State Street because of city limits, basically east of Lake Harbor, and then west of Lake Harbor and the Jalopy Jungle. It's on the north side only, as Garden City's on the south side. So 577 acres, about 140 of that is right-of-way and 668 parcels. The red circles there indicate the primary transit nodes, with the yellow as the secondary. So there's 7 total transit nodes that are all or in part in the district. So this is a question I've gotten a lot over the last few months: why urban renewal? So really, in a nutshell, to deliver development outcomes that have significant public benefit, which the market would not otherwise deliver on its own. So some examples are mixed use and mixed income. They can be very difficult to finance. So anything we can do to help lower those barriers by taking on some of the public improvement cost burdens. Landscape buffers, obviously that's not something that the highway district does. You generally look to engage partners through a cost share, so we would look to do that. Parks and public space. I've highlighted the next 2 pathways and local streets and access management, because these are really transportation elements that we think would be feasible shared costs with the highway district. And then also historic preservation, structured parking. Should it be feasible somewhere along the corridor, maybe at the ITD campus or at the North Gate, potentially doing that. Site remediation, if there are brownfields out there that are not redeveloping because of those kinds of liabilities, perhaps we could help with that. And then local matching funds. If there is a federal aid grant that comes available, an example, this would be Main Street Station, where we provided some local matching funds. Quick recap of public and stakeholder engagement that we have had on this project. So ccdcstatestreet.com went live last June. So it's been up for about 15 months now. And you can find out about the project or submit comments there. Last fall, we did our first virtual open house and survey due to the pandemic. It was open for almost 4 weeks, where we basically asked people where they live, how they use State Street, what their destinations on State Street, barriers they encountered, any suggested improvements. In the spring, we had a prioritization survey where we basically asked them, where would you spend a notional budget along the corridor, and how would you spend it? Would you spend it on mobility? Would you spend it on placemaking or some other economic development. Then in June, we had a couple of community forums where anyone could come on and basically have 90 minutes to learn about the district and provide any comments. I did 6 neighborhood association meetings, either virtual or in person, with the 6 registered neighborhood associations that do overlap the district, and then a presentation to the Boise Metro Chamber Transpo Committee back in June. In addition to that public outreach and stakeholder outreach, we did do a fair amount of interagency coordination. Various departments in Boise City, including arts and history, housing, community development, and comprehensive planning within PDS, IT and public works, parks and recreation, and the mayor's office. MOU partners, if you're not familiar, we meet either through the executive team or the technical team every few months, with partners including the Highway District, ITD, Valley Regional Transit, Compass, and then the cities of Boise, Eagle, and Garden City, as well as Ada County. Also had a couple meetings with the Boise School District. There are 2 school campuses within the State Street District. It's Lowell Elementary and Taft Elementary, to talk about how we might coordinate with them some district improvements with their school campuses. Then obviously we had some additional meetings with Valley Regional Transit, Preservation Idaho, and Idaho State Historical Society have some interest in some, I believe it's 22 historically or culturally significant structures or sites along the corridor in the district. And then Garden City Council. Obviously none of the district is in the city of Garden City, it's all in Boise, but because they have a lot of adjacency, we did want to touch base with them on it. So State Street Plan objectives. I did present a rough draft of this to you back in March. We've somewhat refined it from 4 to 5 and put it along these themes. So the first, as far as transit-oriented development and alternative transportation, encouraging private development that is supportive of and supported by transit, and improve conditions for walking, biking, and transit through public investment in streets, utilities, public spaces, transit facilities, and other public infrastructure. Next is mixed-use development, which we're really trying to push toward away from that kind of Euclidean single use. So promoting mixed-use, residential, retail, commercial, and office along the corridor that is oriented towards and provides economic, educational, recreational, and residential opportunities for surrounding neighborhoods. One of the things we heard a lot from the neighborhoods is any sort of commercial or business that goes in there, they don't want something that's serving, say, the whole region or serving out-of-towners, but really oriented toward the neighborhoods. So next, open space. So secure and improve public open space and recreational facilities where needed. There's some areas along the corridor, obviously at the east end, closer to Esther Simplot Park, that are very well served by open space and recreational opportunities, others that aren't. And then lastly, preservation. And this would be encouraging redevelopment strategies that employ historic preservation and adaptive reuse of culturally significant sites and structures where feasible.
Matt, I have a question.
Yes.
Can you describe the journey and how you arrived at these objectives? Like, what's the process to establish these objectives?
Sure, Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering. So the first we did was we looked at all the plans that have accrued along State Street up to this point. Quite a few of them talk about, obviously, alternative transportation, pushing that mode share away from single occupant vehicle, doing transit-oriented development. So those are a couple. Obviously, mixed use has come up a few times, and I think that's one of the things the city's trying to accomplish with this rezone. And if you haven't heard about affordable and workforce housing, I would question where you've been for the last, year or two.
So is it like a mix of reports and like city priorities, or like how much is data versus community involvement? Like, how do you blend all of those things together?
So what the existing plans had as recently as 2019 State Street TOD plan, and then what we've heard from agency partners from the city, from the neighborhoods. And I think there was one entity I spoke to, well, two, that didn't explicitly talk about workforce and affordable housing.
Thank you.
So,
No, I think these are great objectives. I'm just trying to understand how they came to be.
Absolutely. So, again, the backbone of the plan is the economic feasibility study. It is attachment 5 to the Urban Renewal Plan. It was done by S.B. Friedman. It is required by Idaho Code 502905. What it basically does, it has an informed development scenario which estimates revenues generated over the 20-year district term. Views costs required by public improvements that were identified in the infrastructure analysis we did. So that's what that development program is, how much we're basically expecting to see close to 4,000 new residential units within the district, about 2/3 of that being multifamily, 50,000 square feet of new commercial, 362,000 feet of retail, and a modest size hotel, maybe 120, 130 keys over the 20-year span of the district. Then coming up with a revenue model, forecasting what levy rates would be, and the valuation of those, of that new development, and then applying it against basically the project costs. And those are all identified in the feasibility study in Appendix 4. There's a whole list of projects. It's 3 or 4 pages, and it's broken down by, well, let me get to the next slide. So we've broken down our project costs into our 5 strategies. So economic development, infrastructure, mobility, placemaking, and special projects. In Appendix 4 of the feasibility study, you can see the location. That's basically one of the 7 nodes that I mentioned earlier, at what the strategy is, the name of the project, the cost, the Urban Renewal District share. Some of them we've assumed 100%, some if it's through a developer cooperative, it'd be like 75% perhaps. And then the timing, whether it's broken down into 4 quarters, 4 or 5-year quarters, which of those quarters it would go in. So we have $93.6 million of funded project costs based on our forecast revenue, and that's present value. And then about $21.5 million of unfunded project costs. And we could move those into the funded category should revenues outperform the forecast, or we're able to leverage additional funding. So a little more detail on these, where the highway district is concerned. We identified these project categories that we feel like are potentially transportation elements, that we could include an agreement with ACHD that allows for CCDC to collect the revenue from the ACHD levy on the increment. Is recognized additional agreements may be necessary once projects are ready to be funded. But you can see new local streets, rights of way for those new streets, multi-use pathways, both in the ACHD section of the roadway as well as the ITD section. Rights of way potentially on the ITD row. Potentially, I wouldn't hold out a lot of hope for this, but perhaps converting some private streets to public to get some better local street connectivity, rebuilding existing streets, and then finishing other existing streets that don't currently have curb, gutter, sidewalk, or stormwater facilities. So all in, it's about $37.5 million in present value and cost. The estimated tax increment based on the ACHD levy over the 20 years of the district, we estimated to be $5.5 million. Other costs in the right-of-way that are not included in that, we don't see these as transportation elements. Utilities, streetscape amenities such as trees, landscaping, furnishings, pavers, landscape buffers, and then transit facilities. And real quick, I'm going to walk you through the district frameworks, basically where we put these on a map. So it's broken down into 5 maps covering the 7 nodes. Most of the nodes, you can see the pretty image here of the ITD campus, should it redevelop, have some concepts to basically illustrate the development possibilities or what kind of development scenarios we would find desirable. So the first is starting at the west end. We've got Horseshoe Bend and Bogart Lane. the most notable is trying to encourage continuous local street networks on the north side of State Street. So connecting basically between Jenny and Gardner to further east to Duncan and then to Bogart. Multi-use pathways with buffers along State Street, and this is again the ITD portion, and non-transportation elements there include transit facilities, utilities, landscaping, and some public space. Moving east toward Glenwood, Gary Lane. Again, we look to get some, encourage some continuous local street network and that multi-use pathway along State Street. And again, non-transportation elements, again, transit facilities, utilities, landscaping, and public space. Pierce Park is fairly light. We don't see a whole lot of development potential here, and the district gets fairly narrow, but potentially looking to extend the pathway in partnership with ACHD, do buffers along State Street, and then transit facilities, utilities, landscaping, and then the Stewart Gulch pathway. You can see that in the lower right-hand corner there. We don't anticipate that would be a transportation element. On to Collister and Marketplace. So again, multi-use pathways, buffers along State Street, both sides. Potential conversion of Lake Harbor from public to private street connections, along with a local connection to Plantation to kind of complete that connectivity on the south side of the corridor, and that is in the Garden City. Then some non-transportation elements here, utilities, landscaping, public space, and then pathways along the Farmers Union, as well as Stewart Gulch that I mentioned earlier, and potentially Sycamore Street, building that as a festival street, similar to what we've done with Broad Street downtown. And then lastly, Veterans and Whitewater Park. So again, the multi-use pathway continuing down State Street, a number of local streets on the ITD campus, and then non-transportation elements would include transit facilities, utilities, landscaping, and rebuilding Davis Street as a festival street. So, might ask how we would implement this. And that first bullet should actually be two. So first off, we're looking to engage our agency partners, including ACHD, and some interagency initiatives, which I'll go over shortly. We'll do some public improvements ourselves based on the feasibility prioritization. And then kind of our bread and butter is where we engage developers to accomplish certain public improvements, and then we reimburse them after the fact with tax increments. So that's that public-private participation. Next would be interagency participation. This may be when ACHD is going in to widen a section of State Street, we'd engage them in a cost share to get that landscape buffer on either side. And maybe participate with a pathway as well. And then lastly, property acquisition, building site prep and disposition. And this is an example of it here is the water cooler. We've also done it with Ash Street Townhomes. Trying to accomplish the development that maybe the private market might not be ready to do all on its own, but putting that out to RFP and getting something that's desirable by the community, really targeting that affordable and workforce housing and some mixed use. So interagency initiatives, there are 18 of them. I don't expect you to read them all here. They are attachment 7 in the Urban Renewal Plan that's coming out. Roughly half of them do involve the Highway District. One is interagency agreement for the use of tax increment revenue based on the ACHD levy for transportation elements. 2 is streetscape standards in the area that we would look to get done with developers in the City of Boise, and obviously most of it is under ACHD jurisdiction, so you guys need to be a party to that. Cross-section standards for State Street, so exactly how wide are these buffers and pathways, and where can we put street trees and where perhaps not. Number 8, alignment of long-range financial plans, 5-year plans, and annual budgets to make sure that we're going in and digging once. And then 9, development standards around transit nodes, including connections to those transit nodes. Number 2, items 12 and 15, I believe, involved ACHD, and that's finalizing transit branding, necessary passenger facilities, and rollout for branded transit service on State Street. Obviously, VRT be the leader on that. And then 15, strategic land trades among public agencies to accomplish certain strategies. Again, affordable housing, and with this one, I would point to the old Smokey Davis site is a place, an example of how ACHD might be involved. So next steps, September 1st, we'll have our first publication, notice of public hearing in the Idaho Statesman this Friday. And you will have your transmittal by then as well. Next Monday, we have a planning and zoning meeting for them to find conformity of this plan with Blueprint Boise, their comprehensive plan. Then we'll have our second notice on the 24th of September with a public hearing at the City Council on October 12th. And should they approve, it'd be the first reading followed by second and third. The weeks after that, we would look to get this, well, following adoption, the ordinance summary will be published. Ordinance map and legal will be recorded, and post-adoption transmittals to the State Commission and affected taxing districts, including ACHD. After that, no later than September 1st, 2022, we would hope to have an agreement with ACHD per Idaho Code 502908.
Matt, Mr. President, and Matt, I assume that's a no later than, you have a preferred date? It sounds like everything will be ready by December 31st. Is there a preferred date for approval? It seems to me no use.
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, Mr. Price could probably speak that better to me. I believe the state code says no later than September 1st of the calendar year. I think so. It's obviously too late to do it this year, but I imagine next January.
Yeah. There's no reason to delay if you've done all the heavy lifting up through December 31st.
Yeah, there is no delay. In fact, CCDC's attorney, Megan Congrad, has been fantastic. She's provided us a preliminary draft. We're going to be making some changes to that. We most certainly, within the next 15 to 30 days, we can have that before the commission. So.
I assume we can't approve it until after you've adopted it at the city, right?
Yeah, they need to adopt the plan and then the
within
agreement.
30
But
days of that.
we will make that September 1.
Oh, I'm sure we will. It's
2022.
just like, might as well get it with.
Yeah.
Take care of it earlier so people can start implementing it.
Matt, thank you very much. I don't have any questions or comments personally. If any of the rest of you do, now's the time.
Matt, big project. very
Mr. President,
impressive.
can I ask one question?
Yes.
I just want to clarify and make sure I have a clear picture of the funding participation and obligation to ACHD. And I mean, the slides that went through some of those numbers are way back in the middle of the presentation. But could you just clarify for me what this anticipates for ACHD's obligation? And I'm not even certain, is all of this already in the budget?
Yes, it's already on the TTOP and all kinds of other programs and documents that we're working with the City of Boise on.
Okay, all right.
Correct?
Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, little further clarification. So we basically need the Highway District to opt in for its levy on the increment, and that's about $5.5 million over the 20-year span.
That's what the agreement's all about, correct?
And in return, we would spend at least that much towards agreed upon transportation elements. Feel free to weigh in if I'm wrong, and we need an agreement in that in place. We don't need it necessarily before, much before September of next year because property taxes paid a year in arrears, so we wouldn't even be looking to get increment until after that September 1st certification.
The financial impact would be reflected through a reduction in the property taxes that we get once the agreement's in place and the levies are distributed to CCDC. Again, that's over a 20-year period. It's not $5.5 million in 1 year. It's over that period of time. But we'll get into that discussion when I bring the agreement to the commission. about the financial impacts and the projects that would be part of that. So we'll have a better analysis for you at that time.
Okay, so nothing in our recent decision on the budget
No.
and the levy, none of that relates to this or provides for it. That's in the future.
That's correct.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I just want to say thank you, Matt, for you and the entire team over at CCDC. This looks amazing. I'm really excited to learn more and be a really good partner for this really important and impressive project.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Mr. President, I just want to echo that. This, because we're so unique in Ada County, we operate as a separate entity from the general purpose governments. And yet, we can't make land use decisions, and yet land use decisions have a profound impact on the value of the asset that produces the property taxes that then funds the agency. So, and we've seen tremendous return on investment from areas where there's been the kind of mixed use, and in other states, transit-oriented development have really returned value. And so being able to work with an urban renewal district, one with the kind of experience that CCDC does, is terrific. And while we didn't used to have to sign on to this, the legislature now has created this sort of sign-on process. It's actually probably good because it then informs us about the kind of return we get, because we can't really, we're still obligated to maintain transportation facilities even at land that is producing nothing or very little. And so being able to leverage the resources that we have is great. And I appreciated the quantification, so you can see the cost benefit analysis, the tremendous benefit analysis when you align transportation investments with all the other public and private investments, and then the return on that. And since we're managing the right of way, it's really about the right of way, not about some mode within one or another mode in the right of way. It's about managing the right of way in the context of the development along the corridor. And so I really appreciate just the enormous amount of work and the due diligence that's been gone into it so far, and I'm sure will continue through the end of the year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. All right, as we begin the next item on our work sessions, where the commission is going to move down to the seating on the floor.
Can you give us 5 minutes, Kent?
Yes.
Thank you.
for the application that you passed today. Perfect, thank you. Thank you.
Is Christie here?
I'm right behind you, sir.
All right, I was just gonna say, I didn't hear her out screaming.
Welcome to City.
My only concern about having our work session down here was that the public could hear. So is there anyone that can tell me whether or not someone on Zoom is saying they can hear me okay?
I can go check.
And Mr. President, when you are speaking, since we're using the overheads, you need to take off your mask.
And here I sat through the whole meeting without a mask as it was. Oh,
While you're
well.
speaking.
Okay, is anyone raising their hand saying they can hear me okay? Deanna, if you're still there, raise your hand if you can hear me okay.
Nobody's claiming that they can hear.
I will say that if you can't hear, there's no point in having this down here.
But
Just push it up a little bit.
well, that's hard on YouTube. Is it hard on YouTube?
Yeah. Okay, anyway, I would hope that someone will say, I can't hear you then. And we'll move back up on the dais.
I can, oh, so Deanna said that that she can hear.
That she can hear?
Yeah.
Okay, we're good to go. We'll begin our second session in this work session, part of our day today. It's the integrated 5-year work plan, iteration 2. And this is going to be an action item session because some of the things that commissioners suggest, if we all agree on, we'll have a little vote and do something about it. And that's completely legal. It'll save us time, and we'll have less to worry about on our adoption meeting evening. Is that okay with all of you? I see one is
So-
okay, but she represents everybody.
President Goldthorpe, are we, so is this the only meeting we're gonna have?
No,
as far
not at
as
all.
what we, okay.
We're set up. to
For
have
our priorities, for our community, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we've got 3 set up, but we can have as many as we need before
Okay.
before October.
You just jumped right to the adoption, so I was.
Exactly. Okay, so we'll turn a little bit of time for whatever Christie has to talk to us about, and then we'll talk.
No, she's shaking her head, so we can start our questions.
Okay.
I think she's agreed that, we'll just start with all the projects in District 1, and then move on to District 2, and then if we have time, 3 and 4 and 5.
Okay. No, that's fine. I mean, I think that we ought to probably.
Didn't get a reaction out of him.
Well, we ought to probably limit ourselves as to time, because frankly, I don't wanna be here all afternoon and evening. So,
Maybe we do a couple
yeah, let's
couple
just go
districts
ahead and do a
and then-
couple of districts.
And then do
Yeah.
a couple
And the
more
rest
next
of us will
time.
get the idea of what's going on. I already did a little bit of what we have done in years past. I've talked to members of staff, particularly the director, about some things I would like to see done in my district with the additional funds for community programs. And I'll tell you what, I'll save them for now. They're very small ones.
Well, he's raring to go, so
No.
I'm fine with him doing that, but I do have some questions,
You're welcome.
especially if we're looking at an adoption. Just some questions about some different intersections, the Highway 16 project,
I
so.
just had everything scheduled as.
So I don't need to go through my
for action.
district, but I wanna have a few questions answered.
Well, do you
And I have a
questions?
couple of overall things. The notion that we have to spend the HB 312 money on cul-de-sacs, and I assume we don't have to, we can spend it on other maintenance projects. It just seems to me cul-de-sacs are not a high priority, because they serve such a small number of people.
Except for the people that live on it.
Exactly, just the people who live on them. And that's gonna be a common chronic issue is is with all the cul-de-sacs we have and the few people that actually benefits, what's the cost benefit of that? So I notice on all of these sections, there are, can you pull this down? All of these sections, there are cul-de-sac just sort of gets put in there. And I really appreciate that we can look at this and we can talk to our neighborhoods and say, these are all the things that are going on. Even, I really love that, you know, the Federal Way maintenance yard is in here because that's gonna be a big project, even though it's not, we might do some stuff on Federal Way when we do that. It's not actually to do with the other road networks. That would be one question.
Hey, you wanna state that again, kinda short?
Just whether it's necessary to have cul-de-sacs separated out from other maintenance projects, because it just appears to prioritize them when and I know it's a catch-all, sort of like Central Bench, all the cul-de-sacs.
And I know that, at
You know,
least as far as I'm
Southeast, all the
concerned,
cul-de-sacs.
the only time we ever really hear about it is when we get TELUS complaints. You're asking why Jennifer missed their cul-de-sac.
Right. Well, they, you know, as a, we have them, you know, we serve it, we use public resources to serve a tiny number of people. But that was a decision made by the cities when they approved those designs. The second is, and now that we're integrating it, the project type, and I'm sure you've run into this, is just that it begs what they're integrated. Since we're integrated, calling it a livable street or community doesn't really describe it as much. So I even wonder why we don't even need that category, because as you drill down, you already got improvement types over here. On this street, it's gonna involve pedestrian facilities, bike facilities, ADA, maintenance, and car facilities. So just a question of whether we even need that, because it doesn't sort of help advance it. The next is, and I've already mentioned this to Christy, is I think because we're talking about modes, type of improvement types, pedestrian facilities, ADA facilities, bike facilities, and then the blue one is not a mode, even though we know it's automobile facilities, that actually really good connected pedestrian facilities provide congestion relief. Really good bike facilities provide some congestion relief. The traffic lights are probably the most significant thing we can do to help provide congestion relief on existing roads. I would suggest we just call that category automobile capacity, and I'd actually have two. There's two issues, and one of those was a condition we had in our budget. Capacity and then speed. Because we want to have speed analyzed. Is this an area where we've had some chronic speeding?
It's called what now?
I just say automobile, and one would be, there'd be two columns, capacity and speed.
This is an additional.
It's currently called congestion relief, and I just say capacity and speed, because then it will say, oh, the issue here is we need to add another lane or a turn lane, we need some added capacity, or the issue here is we have speed issues.
You know, part of our,
And so I'd say that would help inform, okay, that's why, because I think we're moving in that direction. So this is my suggestion, is sort of the next incremental improvement. Those are my comments overall.
can I
And
make
then
one?
I'd put, then I could drill down on each of them.
Yeah, we have, kind of pigeonholed ourselves as far as the term congestion relief goes, because, I mean, some of the funds that we receive legally are for congestion relief. And so, I mean, if we add those two things, I don't think we should do away with the words congestion relief, or we could just confuse ourselves.
Well, I just call all of the improvement types address congestion mitigation. All of these things, plus the availability of other modes, which we don't provide, so that we get this notion that the only way to address people's frustration with congestion is adding width to a road. And in fact, the places where people have the biggest heartburn over congestion are roads that are already the widest they're gonna be. That's it.
That seems like something
So-
we can make a decision on right now. I saw Alexis, her head was nodding one way, as far as doing away with the term congestion relief. What do you think, Dave?
Well, whether we label the category or not, the point there is, additional capacity for motor vehicles.
Uh-huh.
That's what it's talking about. And, I don't see a need for a separate category for speed. That's an issue that's always dealt with through, traffic analysis and planning. And then, of course, there are places where we have speed mitigation issues that are needed, down the line. But I don't see a need for a separate category for speed. If we wanted to call this category, motor vehicle capacity, that would make sense. Because really, when it comes down to the roadway and intersection projects, that's the whole point of those, or the primary point of those projects. So, whether we call it congestion relief or something else, it's like, what's in a name? Because that's what it's, I think it's pretty clear that that's what that's referring to, motor vehicle capacity.
Okay, Mary?
I agree that maybe the congestion relief, maybe that's kind of an overused term, but I would agree with McKinney
Take your
about.
mask off when you talk and
Yeah,
shout.
I
Sorry, Mary.
Rules. But the speed, I think, I would agree with McKinney there, Commissioner McKinney on his comments about that, so, otherwise I really don't have any objection.
Yeah, I think when we talk to our residents and our neighbors about, just broadly, like, what are we putting our money towards? Like, the term congestion relief can, to most folks, they just assume that means we're just gonna widen and that's like the only thing, versus I think capacity provides a little bit more context and it actually better defines it, generally speaking, for a person to not kind of get confused that it's only this one thing, right? It actually could be a couple different options. So, but to your point, Commissioner, I agree, like the speed thing could be addressed. There's elements of speed, how I'm seeing it, throughout the improvement types, because we can address speed throughout those things. So I think I would be in favor of, and that's been something that I've been passionate about, is just kind of reevaluating the term congestion relief and having it reflect actually what we're actually building potentially and the variety of things that we would be doing to alleviate that
So
capacity.
is what Jim said okay?
I'm agreeing with Commissioner McKinney, but I'm saying we need to address that term and possibly
Okay,
update it.
well then we have some consensus there with that one area. What did you want to call it, Dave?
Motor vehicle capacity.
Yeah.
Vehicle capacity?
Vehicular capacity.
Yeah.
Right.
Vehicular capacity.
Okay, now, I don't have eyes in the back of my head, that would be my wife. So is Christie taking notes? All right.
Yes, and so is Ryan, and so is Justin, and so is Tom.
I know, I'm just
And,
kidding.
just to, Commissioners, to let you know, Commissioner McKinney did ask a question. I do have this map up here, and I'm more than happy to zoom in or out if there's something specific you'd like to look at. We did take this interactive map down off of the, website.
I know.
Because we're in the middle of the initial, and we didn't wanna leave the initial draft up and give a misconception, to the public as to what we potentially would be taking forward, so we took it down until we get to that open comment period in October, just so you're aware. But I'm more than happy to, get in the driver's seat if you wanna look at something.
Cool. Okay, Jim, now you got more specifics.
Good, and I appreciate that. Now I know why I couldn't get onto the map. And I sent my email and it never got a response, and so I thought, oh, okay, I can't do it.
It's a process to get it updated. And
Yeah, no, that's fine.
all of the tags that go along with it, so it's not a 5-minute fix.
No, that's why, in looking at these, already I'm familiar with the streets and then just use Google Maps.
This is, I think, just a broader term, that's not gonna have that negative, you know, the term congestion, all of a sudden the conversation goes in a whole different direction and, you know, it's got so much negative wrapped around it,
And,
so.
well,
I think
and-
this maybe eases it a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I know we adopted as part of our budget that, as we scope projects, we're gonna consider, where, concerns have been expressed in the neighborhood. So I know that's gonna take place in any case, cause that was a condition of our budget approval when we scope them. So, you know, obviously, in the area I represent, there are very few new projects, but there are a lot of old roads that are being affected by new development that people are driving on, and there are a lot of gridded streets, and they were built for an earlier time, and now there's lots of people who just get on their cell phones and zip down a couple of those streets. And I realize, the priorities are gonna be tough. Well, but there are a couple, and I don't know if you want me to dive into some of them.
Oh, yeah, that's why
Okay.
we're gonna
Yeah.
do 1 and 2 today.
Okay, in the, maybe I'll just sort of, because Boise Central Bench overlaps with, I was gonna say, we're spending the night, aren't we?
Like I said.
Ordering you.
I'll go with the Boise Central Bench and then pass it to Commissioner Pickering, because
I like that.
that's gonna overlap, we're overlapping. The thing I really like about the Kootenai project is that it's phased, so it's a whole corridor, and I assume the reference there to phase 1, meaning it's basically now one phase. It's all gonna be done in 1 year.
That was it.
Right.
Christie, was that if we spent the full $5 million on it?
Mr. President, that was part of the 5 million, was the Kootenai all joining into one
Okay.
project.
Yeah, and
So
that's,
That's not the best
Yeah.
idea.
That project for under one is $2 million.
And
oh, it costs,
$1
Yep.
million of it was already budgeted, and another $1 million comes from Jim's pocket.
I thought the whole budget was about $1 million, and I see it's down here as $950,000. The whole budget for the Kootenai project. The timing on.
I'll update that, that's not correct.
Okay. Anyway, I just wanted, it's helpful to know, I think it's good to have phases rather than, and you see this in Garden Street, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 parts of Garden Street. To me, to the neighborhood, it's like that's another corridor, and I recognize we can't do all the pieces on it, and they're just, and they all have similar things. There's some pedestrian issues, access issues, some ADA issues. And so if there's a way we could talk about Garden Street, we need to phase it, because the 2 of them are pretty big, and I assume that includes some sidewalks. That we view these others as phased parts, so they're not separate projects, and they're integrated. It's a corridor, people.
So would you like to move any of those up in priority or down? Or
No, I wouldn't adjust the priorities, but I don't know quite how doing one year affects the next year on the same street. That's why I'm thinking, let's figure out, so with Kootenai, we knew we were gonna do some in 2020, construction in 2022, 2023, and 2024. I think those were the original 3 phases.
Yeah,
And then
Commissioners.
this year, now at least it's suggested we try and get it all done, although it says here 2022 to 2023, so we'll probably do it in over 2 years.
Well, your adopted budget, Commissioners, Mr. President, has $2.8 million for Kootenai in 2022. So the majority of it would happen all in 2022. There may be a little bit of money in 23 to finish up that project, but the majority of construction is now listed for Kootenai in 2022.
Did that or did
So
that?
where's the
not-
other, oh, here. No,
Did
that's
that-
a
or
one.
Did that not include a note of part of the $5 million? And if so, how much?
Commissioners, the way the budget breaks down on Kootenai, that specific project, phase 1, which is a Waihe Vista, shows about 775 in construction. And the additional phases, phase 2, 3, and 4, it's 874, let's see here, 597 and 519. Those are rough, there's some other little elements in the project, but you can see that by moving all that up, that's a large chunk of the 5 million. And the reason staff made that recommendation was to spend $5 million, the biggest way, the most effective way to do that is to spend it on construction. And Kootenai was one of the few projects we had ready for
Exactly,
construction.
but
Right.
according to our discussion, there's at least 4 of us that don't want that to happen. So
And we're
Jim,
on your
you
direction.
gotta make some adjustments.
No, so I'm a little confused because it's down here as 956.
That's incorrect. I
So-
think that.
Oh,
Commissioner Hanson,
okay.
a lot of documents have been changing. I'm reading you the budget numbers from the adopted
Okay.
budget, and those are the real numbers.
Okay, so, and the design, it says the design year is this year, although the design's not been finished.
Commissioner Hanson, we're completing the design in this year.
In this-
Fiscal year 20.
Okay, so we will see the final design pretty quickly.
Yeah, I don't know where the 99% plans are, but we're very close to finalizing the design for all of the phases of Kootenai
Right.
Street. Now, at your direction, we can break that design up into pieces like we originally thought and bid it out at different, in different increments or different parts, based on the phase structure.
Yeah.
It looks like we have, three major phases of that project.
Yeah, and since I was operating and the neighborhoods were operating, it was gonna be phased. If we can address other projects in the central bench at the same, it might be better to keep it as a phased process. I'm not too sure whether, and that's where you guys are, I don't know where you guys are coming from, because at least the 3 of us are familiar with the whole background and how Kootenai got to us. The nice thing is that it was already integrated.
The funding part is what's coming to a very screeching halt right now, because you don't have the funds unless you move it from other projects in your district to do that all at once.
Right.
So rather than make those decisions right now, I'd say do some homework really fast, and you and Christie and Justin and Ryan can work that out between you, but you.
Well, so they have the expertise on the best use of the dollars and the
Not really.
contracting and,
That's gonna be our decision.
well, you know, if you, this is somewhat new. I don't know if we've done a corridor like this as comprehensively. Cascia is sort of like that, but Kootenai has additional, you know, completed sidewalks and curb extensions that Cascia doesn't. So, you know, I'm fine with it staying in, you know, 3 phases.
Okay, what we need to worry about is when the phases are and where the money comes from and when the money comes in.
Yeah. So let me just talk about a couple of others. The number 1 priority, I think, still coming out of this area, and this is assuming we've already got design done on Kootenai, is Nez Perce, because it has a similar, and I see the design year is 23, and a total project cost, I assume that refers to the 23 costs, not the 2026 costs. You see Nez Perce, Orchard to Columbus?
That's the total cost for the project.
The total cost, so, okay, so,
But that has not been designed yet.
right. If we can get a design that that makes, that addresses issues on Nez Perce in a similar way that it addresses it on Kootenai. Nez Perce, I think, may be still, while it says livable streets, may still be kind of viewed as a bike lanes? Is that it, or no curb extensions, or, because at that cost, it doesn't look like very much.
So just to provide some clarity, we do have a concept study for Nez Perce in fiscal year 22, which would be next year. And that would then move into the design in fiscal year 23. So the concept would be similar, Commissioner Hanson, President Goldthorpe, to what happened during Kootenai.
Right.
Where we go out to it's a lengthy process. Kootenai took 18 months to go through that whole process with the neighbors. We had multiple public involvement meetings where we, developed the concepts that are now being designed for that. A similar process would be for Ms. Bruce. And we need the time to really engage with the community. That's
Right.
right.
And it's a very different neighborhood than the one in Kootenai. You just don't have the property owners along the edge who would be nearly as engaged.
Mr. President, just one clarification on
Sure.
that. The concept that we have proposed was for a bikeway. So if there's a desire to do a broader scope on that project, then we're going to have to come back with a request for additional funding.
Yeah.
And
That's what I'm asking for.
That's what the commission needs to direct, and that's why my hope is that the commissioners, as they discuss their districts, have come with specific ideas of what they want pushed up, what they want backed off, what they want deferred, what they want eliminated, and hopefully in that whole process, they will see all of the costs for all of the phases of the project, from design to construction. And that's why I wanted to keep that part of the 5-year work plan the way it always has been, because that's what has been shown for all the years I've been on the commission. If we don't see that, then we're just gonna say, oh, here's a $8 million project, and what do we do with it now? Because we're making decisions based on information we don't have. And I want us to have all that information.
Was that the only mistake, as far as the numbers go, Christie, for the cost, the project that Jim initially brought up? You said it was a mistake, the numbers?
Yeah, on Kootenai.
Just, that's it,
It's a
but the
little
rest
over-
are,
It's a little over
okay.
2 million for all phases.
But the rest should be,
So that may have been pulling from just one of the phases.
so as we
So that's
continue
in
to
there.
look at our districts, these numbers should be pretty spot on.
So Jim, do you
Yeah,
have
the rest should be in.
So-
Okay,
do you have any projects that you wanted to split up or change when they were designed, or advanced or taken out, or?
Well, I don't want to take everybody's time, but so there's.
Well, we're only gonna do 2 times.
I'll talk about these
This is
two
your
at this
time.
point. And I know I've shared this with staff for a couple of years in a row on concerns about NESPERS, that it needs to be scoped in a way similar to Kootenai, and that if we only scope it as a bikeway, we're not gonna address those concerns. And so, what I prefer is if we need to spread, Kootenai out, for the, implementation over the phased periods, so that we can, adequately address, NESPERS. It's basically a very similar, it actually goes all the way to Columbus, to our bikeway in Columbus. That if we can scope that, we can then have some numbers. On this street, I don't think you have the sidewalk gaps that you had on Kootenai.
Okay, but what
So
we
it may
would-
not be as high, but we need to scope it.
We're having these meetings to deal with the numbers that we already have,
Right.
not that we're gonna ask for in the next 6 months. So that's what we need to concentrate on.
Okay, that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to see NESPERS scoped, so that it's not just a bikeway. And that's why this number doesn't make sense to me, just 312 for an entire project, when Kootenai is gonna cost $2 million. And if the end result is to achieve a similar goal, I don't think there's such a gap.
So do you have any core community projects, stripings, crosswalks, hawk signals, things like that you want put in?
So it's mostly moving things up and back. So this is,
You've got $1 million to spend,
You can-
and that's all new stuff.
he can have, right. So it's not just what's listed.
It's not what's already on the plan.
okay. So there's one other area, that we talked about, before the meeting, and this is one where it seems to me we should not turn our nose up if there is a source of federal funds for railroad crossings. So there's a big, huge piece of undeveloped property on the bench. It's been known as the Simonich property.
Not be something, conversation you have with Justin and our grant people.
So what's been on the my request list, the neighborhood request list, is enhanced crossings of the railroad at Malad, Victory, and then even a pedestrian crossing, not an automobile, at Targhee. and those are not on here. They haven't, they still, I know the requests have been made, but they haven't risen to the level. Now, I don't know what the timing of those would be, but it's like, if you don't get it on the conveyor system, and it would be for future, but that's also the kind of thing where, when we reform our impact fee, we ought to be able to use, impact fee ordinance, we ought to be able to use them for these crossings, because that big development ought to help pay for them.
So Jim, in the interest of time, do you have any of those other things you would like to address?
So-
If not, then we'll go into the next.
Let's go to another commissioner, and I just have, I mean, really do have,
You two today.
We can come back.
just have a huge amount.
We can come back because we've got till November. So, if that's at the very latest here.
He
But,
still has some more.
So I didn't, mean to beat up on you as much as I did.
No, I just-
Just so we know what we're trying to do here.
Because this is the first time we're having this conversation as a commission, so it's gonna be bumpy, and that's how I take it, because, I'm gonna go talk to a neighborhood association tomorrow night, and, they're gonna wanna know where things are, and I'll be able to hopefully interpret from what's on our priority list or draft priority list.
Okay.
And I know the Vista Neighborhood Association concerns that there's nothing on the railroad crossings in their neighborhood, and that we should put something
Okay,
in there.
And there
and it-
won't be for this particular
Right.
iteration.
um,
Because we can't.
Right, well, I just said, so, I'm gonna raise it, how it gets used, and I'll just keep raising it if I keep hearing from the neighborhood that needs to be somewhere in the, so I can go back to them and we can, people later on, because I won't be around after 2024,
Sure.
can go back and say, yeah, it's been on the future, and we have the ability, if something's been scoped, and a development comes in and moves forward and brings money to the table, we can move it up.
Okay, do we want to arm wrestle for the next victim?
You should have your list, your wish list.
I do,
Just
well, I
that,
do, and each
so
one,
that goes
what I
forward.
did was I
Sorry.
ran off these each separately.
Yeah, because even if we don't have the money now, it's
It
on
should
the,
be.
right.
And then I'd love Commissioner Pickering to help me on figuring out how to, phase the Garden Street improvements and know what those are, because some of them look small, and some of them are, 1.2 million, 1.4 million, and 1.1 million. So that's a big, and that obviously needs to be phased, and it overlaps, but it is a main, automobile, biking, walking corridor, between, through the
And-
bench.
And I was thinking too, as this program goes forward, when we have districts that do overlap, maybe we can pool our resources and knock out a project together. So I think that dialogue's important to have too.
Christy, could you mind zooming in on the Garden Street, Irving, Central Rim neighborhood area? Because that's, so I like this idea of like tackling like the, the Central Rim, Central Bench area, in terms of this conversation right now. Because all of us got this petition from the Central Rim Neighborhood Association. And basically you can see on this petition, they're talking about Irving needs to be improved. They emphasize Garden Street, Roosevelt. And when I've chatted with the neighborhood association on multiple times, their priority is really Irving Street. And so, in light of Commissioner Hansen's comments about Garden Street, which is also like all these projects are so important, and it's just a hard conversation right now because I want all of them to be funded, right? I guess they're milking me.
This is why we have so much fun programming.
That's why they're auctioning you off.
I guess. So, informally, and of course, I will be even more prepared next week. But my initial stance coming into this meeting today was to really advocate hard for Irving Street. I've walked it. There's no sidewalks. It is extremely fast. There's so much bike, kiddo, bus stop activity.
construction in the future. I am gonna be advocating hard that that is not the case, and we would accelerate that into being 2024 potentially, or 2023. And that's obviously 825,000, and you look at,
And all they have to do is move some other stuff from the same years and you're good.
okay. Because in a lot of, and I'm talking to the neighbors down there too, they looked at what happened on Kootenai Street, and they've got a lot of that older, grid style, land use patterns over there. And, they're not the kind of neighbors that would initially be like, let's take up all the right of way, because the roads are so wide. Hopefully, I don't wanna go, get above my skis, but I'm not sure if purchasing right of way would be a huge element in this, because the roads are so wide already, and it's such a small local road to begin with. So, that is my first big recommendation, and although Garden Street is extremely important, I just do not wanna see Irving slip through the cracks and be delayed further. I'd like it accelerated. So, and then, do any of you guys have questions about it?
And this is, I just want to point out, this would be a great place for the neighborhood to understand, we don't have the money this year, but that we do have the use of some temporary installations that could give them an indication of what it might look like, that's a lot more cost effective. And they could actually say, we don't need nearly as many curb extensions, we might only need to do these. And so temporary curb extensions on Irving, which is not as long as Garden is, but you can see its function between Orchard and Emerald to avoid having to go through the intersection. People use that to zip through.
Well, and you can
and they go all the way to Curtis.
Well, and further, this is a really key point, connection to downtown Boise.
Yeah.
If you're riding a bicycle or walking, and so Dave, if you're not familiar, there's the Greenbelt access right there. And for folks that are living, north of the connector like I do, that is the safest route to get to downtown without, pathway access and all of these other things, right? So in terms of connectivity and pathways and all of those things, that whole area just desperately needs some investment and improvement. So that
And the land use pattern, if you see that purple line,
Yeah.
it's all residential largely to the right, and commercial and industrial to the left. So Irving is used as a major through street.
Commissioners, just to provide some context on some of the decisions we've made on the central events, we have an adopted neighborhood plan for that
Right.
area. That neighborhood plan identified, at the time, this was 10 years ago, the priorities that they talked to us about, which is why we moved forward on Clark and Camas and Garden and all these other projects we've done. Irving was the next step. I mean, that was also one of the priorities that they had identified, and so that's why you see it coming up as kind of the next one in line. And we are revisiting that neighborhood plan next year in 22, which you've adopted in the budget. So we'll have an opportunity to get more feedback from the neighborhood at that point. We do a big public outreach, that area specifically, we typically get good outreach and good involvement, so.
Well, and Justin, my question to you is, and maybe this is, and again, we can defer to a conversation that's, if this is too weedy, let me know. But my question is, in light of those priorities in that neighborhood plan, we have Garden Street is also very important to them. So I would like to figure out, I don't want Garden Street to also go down in terms of its timeline as well, because together, all of these projects, I feel like they gel, right? Because they're all connected and all, in that same thing. So maybe that's a conversation we should have. It's like, how can we calibrate these area projects so that we're being, reflective of the budgetary needs that we have, but we're trying to not drop too many balls for this area and getting as many of them done as fast as possible.
Yeah, and commissioners, as you can see, the focus in 2022 for this area is Roosevelt, which is
Right.
a project that has been under consideration for a long time. We've even done some redesign to
Right.
New Pathway. That project is moving forward. We're working right now with the railroad on an agreement. So that's in 2022. You move over the next year, and I'm sorry, that's in 2022. In 23, we jump over to the other north-south route there, which is Garden, I believe. I'm sorry,
No,
Orchard.
Orchard.
Which one's that? So we have a maintenance project on Orchard, which will be taking care of some things there. And then we have the, kind of that stepwise approach we've taken out there. We don't want to do them all at the same time because of the disruption to the area. But there is a pretty good approach out there. What you're saying about Irving and our ability to advance that project, that would be a programming exercise we could do to see if we could move the design of that project forward.
Yeah, and that was a project that was just added to the program this year.
Yeah.
So it's brand new to our program. So there's a lot that were in there previously that we're continuing to move up, and that's how Irving came on. We moved that one into the program this year. It wasn't there.
And there's also interesting, I don't know where the city is on the urban renewal districts on the bench, because I think they had 2 in the works. And
Yeah,
so.
Commissioners, our understanding is they paused.
They paused on those, okay.
That's our understanding from staff.
And that's the question is, I don't want us to, I mean, to work with them and pause as well, because they can leverage private money and other funds that we can't in order to do improvements that we would otherwise do. And so it's like getting that stuff done as part of an urban renewal district. And Orchard, that's why I think ultimately, that's how Orchard's gonna be addressed, but it's a complicated corridor, and the city's got a heavy lift to figure that out, because it is the main connection and south all the way down to the Orchard Street connection for all modes. And so as you go up, you realize there's a lot that has to be done, and rather than us go in and trying to do stuff, and I'm assuming the maintenance is just basically pavement. I mean, that section right in there, without doing stuff to the south, we really aren't gonna design any other changes.
Yeah, Commissioners, that section of Orchard, the primary driver there is the bad pavement condition.
Right.
We've done, you'll probably remember that the last several years, we've done other segments of Orchard, we've kind of worked everything down for the pavement maintenance. And that section specifically, it has I believe it has continuous sidewalks already.
It does.
It's relatively developed, and there's crossings already in place. So the focus there would be the pavement.
Yeah, there's actually a really nice crossing right there, that stub where,
Yeah, our offices.
where I was gonna say, public television in the office, that's connected into the Greenbelt. And that's the other thing is, some of these are, sorry, Commissioner, are integrated to make them work. Boise's investment in the rails, with the trails system. So Garden is very much about the trails. I should shut up so you can finish that.
So just to kind of look back to Commissioner Pickering's comment, having staff look at the advancement of the design of Irving.
Right.
Just to put a point in that, I want to make sure we're all clear. We can do that, Commissioner.
We can look at that.
That's something that, I don't know if we can pull it all the way forward into 21 or 22, probably not, but we can certainly look at the current schedule.
That would be
and see if we
great.
can do this. Absolutely.
Thank you, Justin. So, outside of the central rim neighborhood, so if we could, Christy. Sorry, since you said you were driving.
I did. The driver.
I wanted you to, could you, zoom out just a little bit and then zoom into like the Liberty Park area? So my other neighborhood association, and if you could just zoom in on the red,
Sorry, it's just being very, very slow.
Oh, that's fine. Okay, so I'll wait for you to catch up. No worries. So, talking to that neighborhood association, the Liberty Park Neighborhood Association, they described, again, this is what they've explained to me in terms of how Liberty Park has come to be on the integrated 5-year work plan over the years. They gave me the historical background and all of that good stuff. And so they've got the park right there. They've got FMRI, which is, an FQHC. They've got bus stop. They've got a ton of amazing amenities. They've got tons of housing and apartments. They've got this gal named June is donating her property to the City of Boise to be an extension of the park. There's a tremendous amount of activity, pedestrian, bicycle, low-income activity where their only option is walking or biking. So completely agree with their advocacy in making sure that the Liberty Street sidewalk and bikeway, is not pushed out as well, and it maintains the, like, I just don't think that the construction year in 2025, I would like to see that in 2024, if that's possible. It's just, they've been waiting for a long time, as they described it, how it came on, came off, it's been back and forth. And I really just don't wanna see a slip in, cause priorities change, whatever, and they've been asking for it for a really long time. So that's an important thing to me, and of course, I know, money's tight, but there's also this Liberty Bridge, realignment piece, and that's obviously 2.2 million, and it's, construction year in the future. But I would like to see the design year and right-of-way, maintained for 2022 and 23. Cause that bridge, it connects down to Franklin and all of the hubs that the mall provides. So again, the connectivity from that neighborhood to get safely to where they need to go in terms of working, playing, or going to church are pretty limited. So,
Sorry, Commissioner.
go for it, go for it.
I was just gonna say, good news on Liberty is that the design year is next year.
Okay, great.
So that actually, if we're able to hold that design, I don't know if you've ever, I've walked that.
I have too, yeah.
It is one of the funniest statements. It's got stuff going all over. There's
Yep.
utilities, there's basically houses almost in the road.
Yeah.
But, so we'll get the design done, and we'll work through what will be a complicated right-of-way phase, cause it's just not wide enough to access facilities. We're gonna have to run right-of-way. But that would be a potential shelf project. If we hold the design in the right-of-way, which I believe is our current plan, Liberty from 25 could potentially move forward into 24.
Okay.
If we have if those other phases hold, which is our plan.
Okay,
So we'll be hiring the consultant to start the design for Liberty in the next 30 days.
perfect. And I'll just need more information about that, maybe offline, just so I can communicate that to the
We'll
neighborhood
be doing
and
the
all
whole
that good
public
stuff.
involvement phase, so we'll be on the street, having meetings, there'll be open houses, et cetera, et
Well,
cetera.
CC me or do whatever
We
you
will.
need to do, cause,
We sent you
yeah.
a memo with all the.
I know, but
Keep
just
doing it.
specifically be like, Alexis, pay attention to this email. Okay, perfect. Cause I love all my neighborhoods and, I just think, yeah, they definitely need this. So, okay, those are my big ones in this area, Jim. Did you have any other?
I have some in Southeast, just a couple, because Southeast is like the shortest,
Go for it. I don't know.
other than downtown.
Same.
Barbara Valley, I guess, is the shortest.
I'm not done with my entire district, but that's
I know.
like my section in that.
Yeah, no, that was it with the bench, and I'm sure there's others.
I'd like to see you mention what you might want to spend that $1 million on.
And I,
To be honest, I feel a little, maybe it's just my lack of understanding all of these different moving parts, but I would like to have a meeting with staff first to figure out how can we move things up that are already on my list, and then what I could apply that million towards.
I would suggest one other thing,
Okay,
and that is that you hop on your horse and ride your district and find the sidewalk
I
bench.
might get in trouble with horse poop though. We're not like Star
Or Eagle.
or Eagle.
We got
Or
horse
Boise.
I would look for places where you want the sidewalk gaps filled.
Okay,
It's an easy thing for you to do.
cool.
And unfortunately, a lot of it is gonna be pretty expensive. But almost none of that is on this, unless it's incorporated into another larger project. So that might be an easy thing for you to do.
Okay, thank you.
Mary, you wanna start a little bit?
No, I'll defer to Dave, but I did have a question. And, don't everybody get upset and leave the room, but it's about Highway 16.
yeah.
So, and I've asked this question before, and our IFYWP, program, the long-range planning, it's critical. It's what we do. It's useful. We come back each year and address things depending on the prioritization that we get from our partners. And also then if any additional funding becomes available. So that being said, the Highway 16, that's been on our radar for a long time. And so, in the spirit of being good partners and always being able to adapt, ITD received additional funding, so they're gonna be moving ahead with this project. Whether or not, whatever we do with these intersections, that road's gonna be built. So, my question is, when looking through the IFYWP, I'm looking at a lot of 2026 just for design and future. So, my question is, and I'm totally in support of the Linda Road overpass. You know, I signed that initial letter. But we are putting resources into doing a shelf project so that it's ready when additional funding becomes available. But we're not applying that same guidepost to the Highway 16. So we're getting a lot of pushback on, it's gonna cost this, it's gonna cost that. So looking at this sheet that you did, Justin, if you could just help me understand that, as you can imagine, I get a lot of questions, so if you could just take a second to explain this to me. So the total estimated, the 31 million, of that, it shows a percentage that's shared by ITD and Candy County, 3.6. And then it also shows almost 17 million, the 16.8, that are impact fee eligible costs that could hopefully be recouped. So that brings that total down then a little bit, correct? In a perfect world?
Mr. President, Commissioner, yeah, the total cost of the project, of the group of projects that were listed on that sheet is that 30 and change that you just described. As you go through the other columns, it's just, we tried to break out how we get to that number of 30 and change.
So does this
We're not really recouping impact fees. What we're saying is that of that $30 million, this portion, I think it was 17 you said.
Yes, 16.8.
16, we can use impact fees either that will be collected in the future to apply to those projects.
To apply to that, okay. So, and this is over time, right?
Over
This is not
time.
just
It's not a one-time cost at all.
one big bite. I noticed then on the IFYWP too, that the secondary intersections, I think they're in there, if I'm not mistaken, 7 and 8. So McMillan Design 2021, the right-of-way 23, the construction is in the future. So that one's taken care of. And then the 2026 and Star Road Design 2021, so current. Right-of-way 22 and construction in 23. So the two, pardon me, it said, that's the US 2026 and Star Road.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Those are the two that were listed on the bottom for your secondary. So looks like those are already programmed in here. So my question, I guess, is, and just, I'm doing this so you can help me understand the thought process that's involved here. If this is a project that we know that's going forward, why is the design not listed to the end of this current IFYWP to 2026?
So, as you stated, Highway 16 is moving forward.
Correct.
We brought to you that presentation discussing somehow trying to respond to that.
Right.
And although it has been on the books for a long time, the timeline of their construction and the rapidity did, I'll be honest, catch us off guard a little bit. We've been asking them for years, when will you be moving forward? And they've always said, it's in the future, it's in the future, in the future. And then through funding that came available, which is wonderful, they decided to move forward. So we moved forward those projects into the integrated 5-year work plan for design as many as we could. If the commission wants to emphasize more in that area, we can certainly do that. The thought is trying to balance those new needs or needs that were maybe a little further out in our mind with needs that are already on the books in Southwest Boise and other places. It's just balancing all those costs together.
Sure, I understand that. I just, when it says future, and what is the timeline on the initial construction that they're starting this?
It's our understanding they're starting in late 2022, so potentially next year into 2023. And we actually don't know as of today whether they're going to build the at-grade intersections or whether they're going to go ahead and build the interchanges. And so that's something that's still in flux. They came forward with that phase 2 concept, which had at-grade intersections for Ustick and Franklin. And then they've come back and said, we're already starting to design on the interchanges, And if we finish that design in time, we may integrate that design into our final construction, so we may never build the at-grade intersections. They may actually still build the interchanges. And so that's something we're trying to
So
follow.
that's still up in the air, so
That's still
that's
up in
kind
the
of a
air,
factor into the.
That is a
into the
factor
decision
into
process.
what we do. Certainly if they build the interchanges, it has an impact on us. Both projects do, but it just depends on what they decide.
Yeah, and the recent communication to accelerate, it's only still months, occurred months ago.
Yep.
The original thinking is 2026, and so we were kind of programming along.
For the ITD portion?
Yeah, and they bumped that up 3 years into late 22, 23, so it's caught our planning and programming off big time. And so that's why you see these, when they move early, and they caught us off guard. That's the bottom line.
Well, I understand there's still a lot of moving parts, and we were at that one meeting talking about the north side of that. But this road is gonna be built. It's, critical and very important to the people in the west end of the valley to have that that connectivity, the emergency response time, all the very things that have been, shared about the Linder Road overpass. And, I don't want us to lose sight of the import of this to the state and to the population on the western end of the valley. It's almost complete, and I don't want us to get off track here. The road's gonna be built, and whether or not we mitigate and make the improvements on our intersections, at the end of the day, if they don't handle the traffic or the increased, congestion that's going to probably come from this, it's gonna reflect on us. So I think we need to be a good partner with ITD. And so I think you understand my question. It's like, okay, we're doing this one, it's gonna be a shelf project. As soon as they get funding, we're gonna pull it off the shelf and we're gonna go forward. So I've had a lot of questions, because as soon as this got public and people are seeing that future. So I need to have a few answers to
Well,
that, so.
you can recall, Commissioner May, some of the projects that we have identified are impacted all of voltage. That's a different dynamic.
Sure. I just wanted a little bit more clarification today, and I've talked to Justin before. I think we had a quick conversation about the chart, so I just kind of want to understand our thought process and what our intent is, so, yeah.
Commissioner, I'll be honest, I share your concerns, and that's why we brought that presentation forward, several months ago, was knowing that highway was going to accelerate and the potential impacts on Ustick specifically. I'm most concerned about Ustick because of the connectivity
Right.
into those neighborhoods and the draw that will have.
Well, absolutely, and
Obviously,
everything that's happening over in Canyon,
and
we've got the new high
Franklin and the
school.
Amazon structure and oh my
Right.
gosh, there's a lot
Right.
going on out there. That's why we brought that forward. In our first push, you can see, we did you approved an interim signal at Ustick and Black Cat. So Ustick and Black Cat is signalized today. Ustick and 10 Mile is signalized. The school district is under construction at Ustick and McDermott right now today on a signal. And so there are gonna be improvements heading out to that area, and we've already done some. And so it remains to be seen what exactly those impacts of Highway 16 are gonna be. The day they open, are we gonna be ready to connect with our road? It does not appear that way, just because of the timeline. And how fast we react, we'll look to you for direction.
And I understand that, and I think that's easy to articulate to the constituency out there in that area, but it's just, when you know that it's accelerating, and then you look at our IFYWP and it just says future, people, it begs the question, what is our strategy, so, yeah.
Commissioner May, and just remember too, that 6 of those Ustick, the intersection and road segments, were not in the plan last year.
True.
These were all new, added
Right,
in
right.
response to the news of the acceleration of Highway 16. So when we're adding something new in, it's hard to get it all the way, all the way up in the plan, so that's why some of them still say future. But we did, in response to that, added 6 new Ustick projects in. I think we may even added the Franklin one in as well.
I think one thing we're forgetting, and this is a good thing because of all that future stuff, we need to start exerting some fairly significant and consistent pressure on the legislature to to mitigate some of this. I mean, whether it's impact fee eligible or not, doesn't matter to me, because I'm sorry, but I don't want the people in CUNA to have to pay for it. I don't want the people in East Boise to have to pay for it, or on the bench or anywhere else. I've talked to a number of legislators, some of them are, pretty upset with my attitude. You know me, I don't care. But I just told them, I said, you caused the problem for us, you fix it. And there's a number of them that are very open for that. And we've got a legislative session starting here in about 3.5 months. And I think we ought to
We'll need
capitalize
to,
this.
we'll need to engage, and I'm glad you brought that up, because we've had that conversation about Tecum, the money, just, how much did we get? You do the breakdown, it was, I think, and I had a conversation with Mr. Price about that we did receive a fair amount of money this year. I think it came up to about 20.4. I know we've received some is still coming, we don't really have a total tally on everything that's coming in, but I have requested if I could please see where we're applying that to our budget. I think we talked about it in June, and then I brought it up again when Sherwin presented to us. It would just be helpful. How much exactly did we get? The 20.4 of that, what's been applied, what's going to be applied? If we haven't already received it, what's coming and when is it coming? I just think that would be helpful. So if we could get that.
Because it's already been programmed.
I would assume it's in there, but I think our staff could probably let us know exactly where this money has been allocated. So I would like to see just where that money's gone.
It's probably a good idea.
Yeah, just going forward. And I appreciate you giving me a moment to have those questions answered, so.
Just a couple of points. If the commission wants to earmark those dollars as they come in, be dedicated, that is something that you can do.
That's a good idea too. So if we know what's coming and then the things that are on the list and the conversations we're having, that would be a constructive way to approach that too. I think that's a great idea.
Especially with funds that haven't been programmed.
Exactly.
And,
So,
and
yes.
the second point is that in terms of the corridors you're talking about, if you want to make changes to the 5-year program, you need to direct staff to go ahead and either change the future to a specific time frame.
Right.
And they'll need that direction.
All part of the conversation. And no, I know my $1 million not going to do anything here, so that's not where I'm proposing that we put any of the money. I'm more concerned about the schools. Tom, we were out in Star. They've got a couple school areas. I had the meeting, Ryan, with the individual I told you about 8th Street. They combined 8th and 9th, and I believe they did a petition that they delivered. But we didn't get it in our packet, so I don't know. Do we have that petition that Cynthia Gibson and April Frederick did for 8th and 9th Street traffic calming?
Is that for a community programs project?
Yeah.
We have the
Did you
petition
get
that
it?
came in as a traffic calming request.
Right.
So it didn't come in as a request to the integrated 5-year.
No,
program,
I think
which is why
they
you
did it,
didn't-
and they're talking to us about the community programs, and so that came up yesterday. And I guess they were told also too, because of the volume on 8th Street, they really didn't need to go out and go door to door. Is that accurate?
Sorry.
That they did not need to actually go door to door?
They got signatures for both streets already.
For both,
So
so-
the petition covers both streets.
So-
We've already been working on a solution and incorporating as part of a maintenance project.
Right.
That's already planned for that area.
Well,
So
that's good to
We're
hear.
working on solutions to get it incorporated into work that's already.
Yeah, I was really encouraged and happy to hear that you'd already met with them. So I think that's an area that they're looking at combining too, Jim, 8th and 9th Street and the traffic calming, so. Okay, more to come during my time next week. But thank you for that clarification, just to kind of understand our thought process.
Want to go any further, Alexis?
I do.
Okay.
Go.
I'm a glutton for punishment.
Well, take it away.
Good.
I was
Okay.
just gonna say, we're getting pretty close to the time.
Well, I'll be succinct.
Somebody has a birthday party.
Oh, no, I'm not hard, you trust me.
So, Christy, could we go up to the Glenwood, Mountain View, Cole section of the West Bench area? context, this is, full disclosure, two of these neighborhoods are neighborhoods that I have lived or currently live in, so,
Oh, hang on, I'm sorry.
but it's on a private bridge, so you don't have to worry about that.
Conflict.
Yeah, these are public roads that I'm asking to improve on. But the big one that's not in the plan that I would like to see added to the plan, and a design year being next year, if possible. Where are we? Let's see. That's
the right area.
Cole. Yep. Okay. Perfect. So it's currently not highlighted, but so it's just for those of you. So Cole, could you like just put your cursor over Cole really quick? No, it's further west. No, is that Cole? That's Cole. Oh, that is Cole. Perfect. Sorry, I was mixing it up with the other one by the hidden reserve. Okay, so that's Cole. There is no sidewalk on the north side of that street, and that's Mountain View Drive off to the left. And that connects to Capitol and Glenwood and all of that good stuff. And so it's a very dangerous corner. There's a lot of vehicles that are driving into residents' property. They've actually placed boulders to protect their property from people flying through that corner on a left turn. And there's a sidewalk on the south side and no sidewalk on the north side. It's very narrow, and there's 3 lanes with probably a substandard bike lane, if anything. So I would like to see that portion, so it would be a side, so yep, just from Glenwood to Cole on Mountain View.
Okay.
Yep, so that would be a project that I would like to see added, with design, either, 2022. Yeah, scope it and then design, excuse me, thank you.
That's actually a really good idea.
Thank you. No, and that's something that's, the West Bench Neighborhood Association, has advocated for. So that's my big one that isn't currently in the plan that I would like to be added to the plan. And then hold on, while I'm grabbing it,
I can actually promise you that if it comes to pass, it'll cost your own $1 million. Pretty
You
close.
think it'll cost me $1 million?
Yeah.
Probably over.
I was thinking it'd be more than that, because.
With right of way likely.
Yeah.
Because those are pretty constrained on the north side.
Yeah, and they're very fancy lots over there. Yeah.
So Commissioner, what we would do in this situation
Tell me,
typically is we'll go scope that project, which
Okay.
is we send out either ACHD staff or a consultant to get a feel for what it's gonna take to do that. Knowing that specific segment, I've driven by there, there's landscaping, there's driveway impacts, there's gonna be some definite property impacts there.
Yep.
I'm not sure of the right of way width, but, so we would probably scope it in the next several months. I don't think we would be able to add the design into 22. We'd likely be, if everything works out with the scope and everything, the soonest we would do typically would be 23.
Okay.
But that's something, at the commission's direction that we can pursue.
That would be great, and I mean, I've walked with, granted, I can't remember how many houses are on that north side, but I did a walk with, I would say, almost half. And they're all very passionate about doing what they can to fix that road. So in terms of buy-in, it's already there. They're tired of the safety hazards and not being able to even pull into their driveway without getting rear-ended. So they're very excited about it. They really wanted to see it come to fruition. So in terms of the landscaping costs and all those things, absolutely, that's gonna be enormous. But in terms of collaboration with the property owners, for most of them, I don't see that would be an
What
issue.
you might wanna do is, for the first 2 years, the scoping and design, have those costs applied to your $1 million. Because construction will be a little bit past that, and, you can address that with core community projects money then, if it's still a priority for
Okay.
you. So you still have more money to spend.
Okay.
Commissioner Pickering, the one thing I might suggest, the intersection itself is a problem.
It is, both intersections
Yeah.
are very bad,
And
yeah.
the fact that we did do that extension through what the Boise Park is.
Through the farm.
And
Yep.
we've been kind of waiting for that. I would encourage you, if we're gonna go there, that we also scope both the intersection.
Thank you for that,
So
Mr.
you have
Price.
to get them across the intersection, because there's no sidewalk
While
on
you're there.
No.
the east side of Glenwood going north, so we would have to get them there, get them across.
Right.
To the
But we can chat more offline about like
That'll be
that
nice.
coordination and stuff, so, sweet. That's my big one there. Did you have, Dave, it's close to your section, did you have anything in like North Boise?
Not specifically, not right there, no.
Okay. I have more, but I can pause and like wait for other people.
Why don't we pause? I've got one last question to ask, and Steve might be able to address this. We're talking about partnering up with at least one city on projects, and ARPA money has been discussed. Do you think it might be at all advantageous to us from strictly a partnership way to accelerate priorities for cities to go and talk to some of them about ARPA money?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. President, Commissioners, the only thing I would add on ARPA, I had a specific conversation with Compass,
Yes.
the consultant with FHWA. The understanding with ARPA funds as of right now, these are different types of funds. They're not administered by the Federal Highway Administration, they're administered through HUD, through the block grant program. And our understanding is today that we can use local dollars for design and right-of-way acquisition, but if we do that, and we're gonna use ARPA for construction, it federalizes the entire project. So from the beginning, we would have to design it to federal standards and work with ITD and go through that process. So that's,
Good to know.
it's doable, it just creates it adds quite a bit of red tape to the process, just to be honest.
Federal money.
Yeah,
Absolutely
anytime you use
not.
federal
It's
money,
not,
that's right.
it will not be a fast process.
Yeah.
They get-
Okay.
I have a quick and easy one. It should be, because Barber Valley's very, I guess that's why you capitalize Barber Valley, because there's only one. You know, their pedestrian crossings, which they'd really like to see happen. They're down for 2024. This is a area where, I know what's happened is that in every area, you just put $400,000 for cul-de-sacs. Well, you're not gonna spend it in Barber Valley. In fact, I don't think you'll spend any, because I don't know that there's hardly any cul-de-sacs. They mostly designed it with gridded systems. And the other is their new streets. Either take that $400,000 and put it somewhere else for maintenance, if that's limited, or I don't know if we can use that for crosswalks and accelerate the crosswalks, whether that's a maintenance. In fact, this is an example of, Steve, how we should write the language in our impact fee ordinance, because here's enormous amounts of impact fees being paid by all these new developments out there in the Barber Valley, and it's not being spent there. And the two things they want are these little crosswalks, hawks, because as you know, there's the old Warm Springs and most of the houses on the north side, and everybody needs to walk to the south side, and there's not a safe place to walk. So I don't know whether we can use that maintenance money to basically make it a better crossing, so that you have to slow down to get through it. So it'd be a more enhanced design, whether somebody's triggered the hawk or not. Otherwise, you gotta slow down, because however the design is. And if we can, it'd be ideal, we could save all this money from property taxes. If something like this would be ideal, because the reason they're needing it is because there's just more and more and more people. And those developers ought to be, their impact fees ought to help pay for some of that. So
And that's one of the reasons why
those are
you're
the
here. You can tell staff that's what you want.
That's what I want. So that's what I want, both in terms of, think about how we can craft the ordinance to get it something like this. It's triggered.
Oh, the impact, but.
And if, I'd say there'd be zero impact, zero change in the amount of money.
And
Or
just one point of clarification, you brought up the cul-de-sacs multiple times, Commissioner Hanson, I appreciate that, we listed it there. It's not apples to apples where we're spending $400,000 by each neighborhood area. The cul-de-sac dollar is actually allocated by maintenance zone. We have 7 of those, they're much larger. So, it's just the way we listed it here. If the Barber Valley falls under one of our larger maintenance zones, which it does, the $400,000 is listed, it's accessing that money for whatever cul-de-sacs are in that area. There may not be that many, that's very true, but certainly in that maintenance zone, it's a total of $400,000 per zone, not per neighborhood area. So that's a cleanup we can do in the plan. You've said it's confusing, I agree with you. I think we can clean that up, because it really isn't apples to apples where it's $400,000 spent in each of those areas on cul-de-sacs. It's actually not nearly that much will be spent in Barber Valley on cul-de-sacs, because they're not there and we won't spend the money there. So we'll clean that up and we can fix that.
Yeah, it was meant to just show the total project cost for that particular project. Some projects cross
Yeah.
neighborhood planning areas, so we didn't want somebody to look in there and think it was only, you know, 200,000 to do this entire segment. Because it crossed, we were showing the full amount for that total project. But yeah, we can clean that up to make that clear. And then before the next meeting, I would ask the commissioners, if you guys have lists of projects or specific things that you would like to talk about, if you could send Ryan, Justin, and myself those lists ahead of time, so there's additional research or things that we need to look into prior to next meeting, happy to do that, but it would be great to get those ahead of time.
I have a quick question though on the whole cul-de-sac piece, because I appreciate that, Justin. It is confusing. What does the HB 3112 project mean?
So the legislature allocated a certain amount of money to the local highway districts and other local agencies through House Bill 312, which is HB 312. That money has strings attached to it. It has to be spent on maintenance-related activities. So the cul-de-sac program is one of the maintenance-related activities that we have identified as eligible for that funding. There's a lot of activities we use that money on, not just cul-de-sacs, and actually cul-de-sacs is a very small, minuscule portion of ACHD's overall maintenance budget.
So then what's the difference, and sorry if I'm getting too weedy, but what's the difference between a cul-de-sac reconstruct and a repair?
So a
Because
cul-de-sac.
it's the same price here it's showing.
Yeah, we make the determination very close to the project on what we're gonna do. We do a visual inspection. Most of the cul-de-sacs we're doing is a slurry seal, it's a surface treatment. If a cul-de-sac needs to be reconstructed, we actually pull out the asphalt that's there and reconstruct it with new asphalt typically. So there is a cost difference, and really it's, with the money we have, if we need a lot of reconstruction, we just do less, because we can't spend as much as we would on the slurry seal.
But if I can, we have more maintenance projects than we get from. We have an easy time using those particular funds, and it's really the county reporting that we have to do to the state treasurer to show that we use those funds for, in accordance with the statutes restrictions. The other thing I want to bring up, you guys have projects you want, just tell us, we'll figure out what money we can pull out of to do it. I mean, there are a lot of restrictions on various dollars. You want the project, we'll figure out what pot it has to come out of and to make it happen. It's really a revenue allocation strategy. Sometimes you have to move it this way and that way, and we've got enough projects that within all of the funding restrictions, we can get it done. Now, we are coming back at some point to talk about the impact fees and some of the issues surrounding that and going forward into the next legislative session. So we can, Commissioner Hanson, we can duly noted, and we'll address it at that time.
Yeah.
Very good.
And I gave staff, when you asked for our input back in March, so I don't want to sort of rehash those. Obviously my concerns are the same. So I don't know if do you want me to resend that, or?
Well, what specific changes you want to the existing draft? So we have that original, but that was before we programmed.
Right.
The 5-year work plan. So now that we've programmed this draft, I would like to know, are there specific projects you would like accelerated, moved back, whatever the case may be?
Yeah, so like NESPERS, you don't necessarily accelerate, but expand clearly.
Right, so
Commissioner, that's what we heard today, yes.
Yeah.
And if there's others,
And then
we can revisit that.
Yeah.
I think we can go back through that.
Yeah, because that's sort of the core. There's not a lot different. It's just sort of the context. I don't see some of those, so I'm going back and forth between each. And is there a way of getting, the online map is so helpful, cause you can go in there, you could just, on this chart, you just see an amount, but you don't really know what the rough scoping is. You think, oh, that doesn't seem like enough. And then you click on it and find out, oh, it's just gonna put some signs in. So, is there a way we can access something?
We can get you guys.
Give us secret access code, or, you know?
We will share access to the map you see here today, you'll have access to that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Hey, guys, we're adjourned.
Thank you, that was
That was great.
good.
Thank
That
you,
was
thank you for pushing
Huh?
to do that. Are we adjourned, or do we have an executive meeting?